Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joseph Atick, Executive Chairman of ID for Africa, and this is LiveCast number 38. I'd like to warmly welcome you to this exceptional episode that kicks off another theme of major relevance to our global community: digital identity in the service of social protection, SP, and humanitarian aid. Here we see a strong role of digital identity for good, and we would like to bring that forward in a series of LiveCasts, starting with today's episode and continuing over the coming year with a passage through our AGM. Today's episode consists of 4 segments as follows. We will start with an eye on Sierra Leone. We are spotlighting Sierra Leone within a social protection episode because of their emphasis on developing their digital identity program to support inclusive public service delivery, including financial inclusion, access to education, and health for all. In segment 2, we will then examine how a social or humanitarian stack built on functional digital identity, payment, and supply chain platforms can provide interoperability and help deliver assistance and resilience to vulnerable communities, such as those where the World Food Programme, UNHCR, Action Against Hunger, and others have been operating. Then in segment 3, we will examine decentralized identity for humanitarian and SP service delivery. With many SP practitioners hesitant to embrace centralized identity schemes for fear of surveillance, this segment will show that there are viable alternatives for service delivery that do not require centralized registers. This segment will consist of 2 parts. Part 1 explains how it works, and in part 2, we hear how the Red Cross is using it in a program called DIGIT, Dignified Identity. Finally, we will examine last-mile inclusion challenges and how to address them through functional digital identity and offline credentials. As you will notice in today's episode, we're not addressing traditional social protection themes such as SP policies and practices or targeting or building social and household registers. These are all important topics, but they are out of scope for today. We expect to come back to them in the future. Instead, in this episode, we will focus on tools and capabilities such as social digital stacks, decentralized functional identity, and last-mile delivery schemes that can facilitate SP service delivery, mitigate privacy risks, and achieve deeper inclusion for difficult-to-reach populations. We will illustrate these ingredients within the context where they have been deployed and used for humanitarian purposes. So stick around. This promises to be another cannot miss milestone episode. But before we start today's program, I have a few important announcements to make. First, I'd like once again to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for supporting our LiveCast series. Their support enables us to continue to develop quality and timely content for capacity building in identity matters and to make it available as digital public goods on our YouTube channel. Please remember to support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel and by liking and sharing the content you find useful. Your engagement helps us significantly expand our outreach. Second, I'd like to give you an update on the AGM coming up May 23rd to 25th in Nairobi, Kenya, under the theme Digital Identity as Public Infrastructure. This is a very timely topic, and we're pleased that we have been able to develop a top-notch, highly responsive program. The program explores what governments can and need to do now to take their identity schemes to the next level. It examines the range of options available for supply-side identity verification for service delivery, as well as demand-side development and twinning of identity with different sectors, including social protection and health. The first 2 days of plenaries culminate with a very interesting session on how the different actors in the global identity community could work together within open standards or open source frameworks to produce digital public infrastructure that can be responsive to the digital transformation journeys of the majority of countries. The plenary sessions are illustrated with many case studies from Africa and beyond, are interspersed with keynotes and spotlights that summarize lessons learned. Once again, this year we have an impressive lineup of speakers on the program. I want to emphasize that these experts are not speaking on disjointed topics, but in fact are performing together like actors in a play, each with a very well-defined role to tell a coherent story about the consequences of treating digital identity as public infrastructure. The sessions successively build on one another, like the different acts of a play. Among those speakers, we are thrilled to be welcoming an impressive panel of ministers who will join me on stage for the opening act in a policy roundtable to discuss how countries can accelerate their digital development through policies that favor a whole of government approach to digital identity and transformation. In advance, I want to thank all the speakers who, through their participation, will be helping the movement deliver an exceptional knowledge-sharing event, and who, together with the 1,200 plus high-caliber delegates, will contribute to making the 2023 AGM a thrilling and rewarding networking experience. I invite you to check out the detailed program in the link provided in the chat or in the description below if you are watching us on YouTube. In the previous LiveCast, I shared detailed insights about each of the plenary sessions. I encourage you to rewatch that portion of episode 37. The link is in the chat. In today's episode, I want to elaborate on the 4 workshops which take place on the 3rd day of the AGM. The objective of the workshops is to provide attendees the opportunity to engage in impactful discussions and brainstorming activities that help advance our collective know-how and address key challenges facing our community. We introduced this format for the first time at the AGM 2022 in Morocco, and it was a huge success. This year, we're addressing the next set of themes using the same successful format. I now like to present the 2023 themes, and I will do it in the order of novelty relative to last year. Starting with workshop 3. This is the most novel and most actionable. This is the inaugural meeting of an exciting initiative that ID4Africa has been incubating and developing in collaboration with our ambassadors and our development partners, UNICEF, UNECA, and OpenCRVS. The initiative is called AXA, which stands for African ECRVS Shared Asset. The objective is to explore how, starting with existing assets, the continent could develop and maintain its own ECRVS solution that's interoperable with foundational identity based on digital public goods. The asset will be freely available to any government organization in Africa. The workshop will cover the 3 core components of the AXA initiative. First, design principles. Second, the digital CRVS solution. And 3, governance. The aim is for the African civil registration and identity leadership to agree on how the initial version of AXA can be developed from existing assets and how it can be sustained and governed going forward. Workshop 2, policy and regulatory challenges for digital identity, the African perspective. This session is chaired by Sanjay Darwakar in his capacity as expert and Hadija Dagabana from NIMSI, Nigeria. One major outcome of this session will be an overview of all the changes and reforms in policy, legislation, and legal frameworks that African countries had to do to prepare their identity and civil registration systems for the digital world. We will hear firsthand accounts on what was needed, how they went about getting the legislators up to speed, and what lessons were learned in the process. The workshop will also identify remaining gaps and controversial issues that have risen as a result of the introduction of digital identity. The goal is to ensure that we understand what it will take to create inclusive systems that empower and respect people's legal and human rights. Workshop 4. In reality, is a side meeting of a number of privacy and data protection commissioners from Africa and is organized by the Office of the Kenya Data Protection Authority. ID4Africa is supporting this meeting by providing the convening environment and the attending delegates. We are keen on making sure that there is independence in that workshop so that the data protection commissioners are not influenced by the identity community and can raise their issues and concerns regarding the rapidly emerging digital identity ecosystems around the continent without any interference. Workshop 1, building people-centric, demand-driven digital public infrastructure to transform public and private sector services. This is chaired by our development partner, the World Bank, and is focused on the nuts and bolts of building DPIs. It is an important continuation of what was started last year, and in a way, this is an extension through a hands-on working session of some of the core topics of the plenaries. It is chaired by 2 terrific domain experts who are backed by strong popular demand. We will be unveiling the discussants in the coming weeks. So, how can you participate in these workshops? Just like last year, you need to apply to become a contributor. As a contributor, you get a seat around the U-shaped table with a microphone, and you can join the full dialogue and debate. If you're not selected as a contributor, you are always welcome to watch and listen from the observer gallery, but you cannot speak. So how do you apply? If you have already registered to attend the AGM, you should have received an email yesterday with the link to the application form. If you have not registered, please do so ASAP in order to receive the link in the email confirming your registration. The deadline to apply to be a contributor is April 15, but we will be filling the available spots as we go along and on first come, first served basis, and of course, through evaluation of fit and merit of every candidate. So how many contributor seats are available for each workshop? Here is the chart of available places for the 4 workshops. There are 20 contributor seats for W1 and 100 seats in the observer gallery for that workshop. 15 contributor seats for workshop 2 with 80 observers. W3, this is the AXA, has 0 available seats. All contributor seats for that workshop have already been taken by civil servants who will officially represent their country to the board of AXA. So our apologies, this workshop is not open to any more contributors. Nevertheless, you're welcome to attend in the Observer Gallery, where we have 100 seats. This is a milestone meeting. Come and witness, hopefully, the birth of a very promising initiative in Africa. While for W4, we should have 15 seats and 80 observers. The application form is very simple and should not take you more than a few minutes to apply. So try your chance. But remember, you have to be registered for the AGM to get the application form online. Finally, as a reminder, we closed the AGM through 2 LiveCasts in June to sum up the physical event, including the workshops, and to discuss next steps in our continuing journey together. We are now exactly 2 months away. 2 months away. So if you are planning to attend the AGM, I recommend that you register today and get your travel arrangements sorted out. Please do not wait till last minute. Also, I need to share with you a few fair warnings. Registration will close 1 month before the event date in order to give us time to get the badges prepared, produced, and shipped to Kenya. And it is likely we will close registration for certain categories that are now oversubscribed before that definitive date. For example, the government category has already exceeded our planned capacity, and we are borrowing seats from other categories, such as the private sector. Finally, you need to know there will be no on-site registration and no access without a badge. And this will have no exceptions, as this is the policy we worked out with the host government. So please, if you intend to attend, do register now before it's too late. Also, I appeal to anyone who is registered and who is not going to be able to attend to cancel the registration as soon as possible so we can recover the seats to give to others. Thank you. If you have any questions about the AGM, do not hesitate to ask them in the Q&A or send us an email to livecasts@idforafrica.com, and we will make sure we'll get you the response. We are now ready to start this session. I'd like to welcome, in the order of appearance, Mohamed Massaquoi, Director General, National Civil Registration Authority and ID for Africa Ambassador for Sierra Leone. Jusufu Swaray, Director of Database and Voter Roll Management, Electoral Commission of Sierra Leone, and Deputy Ambassador. Daniel Kaitibi, Director General, National Telecommunications Authority, Sierra Leone. Mohamed Jalloh, Director of Communications and E-Government Services, Ministry of Information and Communications, Sierra Leone. Michala, Mackay, Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation, Sierra Leone. Philip Bangura, Deputy Director, Banking Supervision, Bank of Sierra Leone. Jeneba Bangura, Deputy Commissioner General, National Revenue Authority, Sierra Leone. Lionel Baraban, CEO, Famoco. Andréa Muller, Product Manager, Famoco. Eloise De-Tassigny, Business Lead, Gravity. Priyanka Patel, Innovation Manager and Team Lead, Kenya Red Cross Society. And Gabrielle Rohan, CEO of Paycode. Welcome, and thank you to all the panelists for being with us. We truly appreciate your valuable contributions to this livecast and to the cause of identity for all. I look forward to engaging with each of you within the different segments coming up. In fact, we're now ready, without any delay, to start the first segment of this episode with an eye on Sierra Leone. The country has come a long way over the last 10 years, and today can count on a performant identity ecosystem that consists of a high coverage national population register, the appropriate enabling environment, which includes institutional, legal, and infrastructure, and the necessary whole of government approach to identity and service delivery. Today, digital identity in Sierra Leone is a core foundation upon which all sectors can rely, and it is becoming part of the country's culture and a core tool for policy reforms such as financial inclusion, universal health, education, and other social protection necessities, existing and future. So let us journey with the people who made this happen. We will be successively bringing officials from different government agencies in Sierra Leone to share with us their experience and to tell the story and the lessons learned. I assure you there is a lot to be learned here. The segment is organized into 4 parts. The first 3 consist of the 3 phases that the country went through in building its identity ecosystem. And then in part 4, we will talk about enabling use cases, including financial inclusion and social protection, and the consequences of having such a performant digital identity. Let us start with ID for Africa Ambassador and Director General Massaquoi. Ambassador Massaquoi, let us start with you just orienting the audience and explaining to us what were the 3 phases that your country went through in developing its identity ecosystem. Just mention them, and then we will delve in phase by phase and we'll build a better understanding.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atick, and welcome colleagues from other ID institutions in Sierra Leone and other countries involved in the ID ecosystem. Like you said, in Sierra Leone, the 3 phases that we adopted more in developing our ID system in Sierra Leone includes the planning and institutional or legal frameworks or legal reforms to ensure that we have an appropriate legal institutional infrastructure in place to manage and coordinate ID issues in this country. And then next was the campaign to establish a foundational population register that we started in 2017 involving, it was a government-led decision that attracted every government institution, public and private as well, to make sure that we are able to develop an inclusive foundational population register where no one is left behind. And the 3rd phase was making sure that our endeavors are sustainable and with a steady state in support of service delivery as and when they are needed in the country. So critical, those are in brief the 3 main things that we considered in the identity evolution in Sierra Leone.
Excellent. Why don't we start by talking about phase one, which is the planning, and that's very important to help other countries who are very much find themselves in this situation, planning to launch a digital identity program. So can you walk us through where you were and how you planned to improve and get to the next level?
Well, generally, like you may know, and many others, my colleagues from Sierra Leone in particular, are aware that before the establishment of the umbrella institution that manages and coordinates the identity management and civil registration in Sierra Leone, and identity management and CRVS activities were done and managed by different institutions, causing it disjointed and coordinated in a very large way in registering people for various purposes. And in that, we also we realized that there were no reliable foundational ID system, as multiple institutions were doing registrations for different purposes, including, for instance, the production of national ID cards and driving licenses and social security scheme and passport and other immigration opportunities and credentials for births and deaths, including marriages, divorces, as well as Registrar General's mandate, among others. So that is how it was fragmented in Sierra Leone. Generally, you will agree with me with this fragmented nature of identity system. You will agree with me that it will cause waste of resources. It will cause duplication of efforts and time among government institutions, and as well as it will dictate challenges in the coordination and management of identity services, with even the possibility of having one individual, getting one individual with multiple different identity information that makes it prone to errors and fraud. And in addition to causing wastage of government resources, because there was no central system to manage the ID system in a reliable manner. And then following that, government works with its international partners, government agencies, and UNECA being one critical partner to government. In 2010, the UNECA, the African Union, and other development partners, such as the World Bank and UN agencies, saw the need for a national CRVS and ID system across Africa, with the establishment of an Africa program for accelerated improvement of civil registration and vital statistics. We call it in short API CRVS. And following that, the country Sierra Leone reviewed and amended laws around that involve registration and identity management services. And the review or the reformation led to the drafting and development of an assessment and policy on civil registration reforms in Sierra Leone. For that, I am happy to report that, to note here that Dr. Atick here, facilitating this event today, was a lead person in the development of our Sierra Leone's national civil registration and ID management reform policy that was widely approved, acclaimed, and recognized by government and its international partners. Dr. Atick, your work paved the way for an improved civil registration and ID management system in Sierra Leone. That today, if we say Sierra Leone support other countries, where other countries learn from Sierra Leone's ID and civil CRVS system, your work, your piece, your report is a critical reference for us as a country and for many other countries that have always referred to Sierra Leone in terms of ID and civil registration. And the same policy document that he led its development and its assessment in Sierra Leone was adopted by cabinet in this country, and it became the national policy now on civil registration reform in Sierra Leone. That policy informed the establishment of the National Civil Registration Authority, a government institution, a state institution that is responsible for the management, coordination, and regulating all forms of civil registration, vital statistics, and identity management in Sierra Leone. And that policy went beyond that to also put together the framework for legal reform for birth registration and other registration services that we are undertaking in Sierra Leone. So in brief, those are the critical things in terms of the reformation and evolution of the civil registration and ID management that we had in Sierra Leone.
Actually, talk about how you built the steering committee, because at that early stage, it wasn't so clear. I mean, we're talking 2016 and NCRA just was moved as an act in the parliament. But how did you pull together the various stakeholders to form the steering committee?
Well, relying on your report, Dr. Atick, your report, and cognizance of our government's decision to make sure that government interventions are participatory, that involves 5 stakeholders associated with civil registration, VS and ID management, as well as other government interventions. We, as a government, established governance structures to manage and coordinate CRVS and ID management functions in Sierra Leone. One of it is the establishment or the formation of the National CRVS and ID Management Steering Committee. That steering committee brings together government, ministries, departments, and agencies, including my colleagues on this forum today and many others not here now, as well as our international partners, UN agencies, the World Bank, DFID, the Irish I8, and the UNDP, etc. The steering committee is multi-sectoral. It is chaired by the Minister of Internal Affairs that supervises the NCRA, our institution, and is co-chaired by the UNDP resident representative. And below the steering committee, we have the task force on civil registration and ID management. And that level is more of a technical level involving heads of institutions, where the Director General of the NCRA chairs that. And on that committee, the task force, we have many other agencies involving, including the Electoral Commission, the Minister of Information, the Bank of Sierra Leone, many other institutions of government in this country. So we, at technical level, prepare the steering committee membership that will guide them in directing the affairs of civil registration and ID management in Sierra Leone.
In fact, that was one of the best coordinations that I've ever seen, which was an inclusive approach to bringing partnerships instead of fighting or competing with each other. All of these agencies came together and basically formed a whole of government approach, which is what we would love to see everywhere else in Africa. In fact, we want to see that the strength of collaboration in this next phase, which is you arrived at 2017 having the law behind you and the institutional arrangement behind you. But now the question was, can we get the population to be enrolled? What were the drivers to bring them? What are the lead partners who are going to come to the table? To help you tell this story, I think I'm going to ask the operator to also bring in Mr. Swaray from the Electoral Commission, and we'll bring in also NaTCA as well. Let us come in, and then Ambassador, explain to us the campaign that you launched in 2017 to build your National Population Register, and how did the two organizations, the Electoral Commission and NCRA, which was newly founded, collaborate, and how did NaTCA, Mr. Kaitibi could explain to us, how did NaTCA support that campaign. Let's just focus on that campaign 2017. We'll start with the ambassador, and then we'll go to the deputy, and then to Mr. Kaitibi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atick. When we now had the infrastructure, the legal framework, and then the next was to have the enrollment of the population of the country that involves citizens and other residents in the country of every age bracket, from 0 to wherever it may be. And then we had 2 phases of it. We had first phase that we did jointly with the then National Electoral Commission, and then that one targeted mostly because we are almost getting to elections in 2018. So we made sure that the 2 institutions collaborated and targeted people, citizens of voting age, that is 18 years and above. And then thereafter, when that voter register was developed, then the next phase in the same year was a mass registration involving every other person that had not been catered for, that is from birth and then to every other resident in the country. So that was done with the Electoral Commission. But importantly, we did not only collaborated in the enrollment of the population with the Electoral Commission, we also collaborated in educating the masses on the need to register. And we also collaborated and secured government support to make sure that there was a government directive that made the registration enrollment compulsory for everyone in this country.
Hold on to that thought. Let us get the perspective from the Electoral Commission, understand the dynamic.
Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, everybody. As you rightly said, by the DG, in 2016, after the conclusion of the 2008 local council election, observers from the European Union, the African Union, and ECOWAS indeed prefer that registration of voters is a continual process, and it involves lots of resources. So during the recommendation at the end of the voter registration exercise, it was recommended that the NEC should consider having, Sierra Leone rather should consider having a central database in which voters' information could simply be extracted and prepare the voter roll for subsequent election. So in 2018, the National Electoral Commission by then submitted a budget for voter registration, whilst the NCRA also had similar activities. So the government thought it wise that why can't we just combine these 2 resources together to have a joint operation where both institutions could actually make gains. In that direction, the NCRA and the ECSL, though they have their legal framework being defined separately, because for the ECSL, it is the mandate of ECSL to do voter registration, and that is enshrined in the Constitution, unlike the NCRA Act. But when the government by then saw that it was necessary for the 2 teams to come together, they decided that portion of the ECSL budget by then, in terms of procuring laptops, devices that could be used to do the registration, those budgets were sliced off. And then it was advised that those kits that have been purchased by the National Civil Registration Authority be used to capture voters as well as other citizens after the process. So in total, we had 3,300 centers nationwide, and the government procured about 4,000 devices, and they were deployed in all 3,300 centers where registration occurred simultaneously across the country. We had the opportunity to actually capture the biometrics and biodata of citizens at that period, because it was divided into 2 phases. We had a phase 1, which was only meant for those of voting age, 18 and above, and only Sierra Leoneans. So after that process, the data was also adjudicated to make sure that people were without for double registration. And after the exercise, we used the same NCRA infrastructure. We have only one adjudication system, the EFIS, and it was used to adjudicate the data, and then duplicates were removed. One good gains we make doing that, putting the effort together, we realized that instead of us getting back to them, we are able to weed out double registration, and those that actually register more than once, their information were sent to the police and the actions were taken against them. The collaboration, it was not easy at the initial point to have the NCRA and the EC coming together at that particular time, because it was like the NEC, and then, at the time we are saying they have been doing voter registration and it's still enshrined in the Constitution. So allowing NCRA to do this voter registration process is like taking their bread from them. So we had to go back and forth, but at the end of the day, the government brought the two parties together, and then we are advised to do the exercise as a joint activity. And that gave the name to the activity as a civil and voter registration, which was actually the phase one. And upon completion of that, we also roll out campaigns, sensitization activities around the country to make sure that people are informed that the exercise is not only being undertaken because of the civil register, but this will also allow them to participate in the then coming election. So we saw the team as a single unit, and then we are all together to make sure that we have a voter registration process. Because at the end of the day, that will also save government a lot of resources, and the NCRA were then given the opportunity to carry on the activities at the end of the first phase, which they did to capture the remaining bracket that are not of.
We'll come back to that in a second. Hang on to this. I want to understand a little bit better, because what you've done is a best practice, which is the idea of extracting the voter rolls from a foundational identity register. And that's what we would recommend as a best practice across all of Africa. Some countries are doing it. You were not doing it, now you're doing it, so that's great. But many other countries that when you talk to them, they say there is a big hurdle, which is that the opposition, for example, does not trust the government to be managing the voter rolls. How do you build trust in the voter rolls when the data has to be coming from a government organization? And so what kind of transparency, what kind of governance do you need to assure the opposition that this cannot be faked or ghosts cannot be injected into the foundation register? And this is either one of you could answer that, or both.
Yeah. The idea of trust is one of the major hurdles around extracting data from the civil registry. It's a fact, and we experienced that recently when we are about to extract for this particular election in 2023. The opposition, which I can say actually laid the foundation for the establishment of the civil, the NCRA, were not in favor at this time for the ECSL to extract data from the civil registry. And it was the case again in 2018. The opposition then, the ruling government now, was also not in favor of the idea. But what we did as ECSL, we had to bring them together, and then we were actually able to bring them on board to make sure they have, one, access to our infrastructure, and also looking at our sample database, how is it structured, and we are able to do some form of live demonstration to verify the processes. For instance, we are taking your biometric, and if those features are not available, we find it very difficult to actually be enrolled. So we have to also tell them that our system of the civil registration system is designed in such a way that for every registration you do, you have a unique identifier, and you can have only one. So as long as you go to the civil registry, it is unlikely that we can have two records into our system or allowing ghosts to be part of our system. So we even had some live demonstration where you try to register more than once, and then the system will automatically flag you. And so we prove all those concepts to them that indeed it's a system that is trustworthy, and it is something we have conducted the other election on, and we did not hear any foul play of, names missing, although we had some like incomplete data set, but we never had a cry like, oh, a particular polling center is reporting less than what was actually recorded. So those facts are presented to them in what we normally call PPLC meeting, where we engage all political parties. So that trust, moving onward, they have seen some resemblance of trust in the system, and that gave them the courage that it's the second time the ECSL has now extracted data from the civil registry. At this point, even when we are about to share the ID card, they are now confident in the process to some level. Although some might say, yes, we know there are one or two things you need to put together, but we keep saying you can come to our office at any time, and then we verify what we have for you. So, on the whole, we are building the trust, and I'm sure that is actually what has helped the ECSL up to this point.
And in addition to that, Dr. Atick and colleagues, that we made sure as institutions, us NCRA and the Electoral Commission and other agencies involved in governance in this country, we made sure that we popularize, we adequately inform to the public on the importance of the relationship between the civil registry and the voter register, and then with clear references to the provisions, to the legal provisions, one, the NCRA Act, and of course the legal mandate of the Electoral Commission. So those ones were very much exhaustive, and in addition to all of those ones, we also made sure that we engage the public in a sustainable manner, where we made sure that they understood the linkage between the civil register and the voter register. And important also is the reference to the recommendations of our international partners after the 2018 general elections, where the European Union and other partners recommended very strongly to government and the people of this country the need for civil register to support the development of the voter register. One, for its reliability; two, for its saves costs, its inclusivity, and it's more sustainable, whereas voter registration is an episodic event. So those ones went a long way to assure the public, to build confidence in the work that we are doing. In addition to that, also, we made sure that we organized fora, the ECSL, the commission organized fora where the NCRA participated to clarify issues to the public where they needed clarification. For instance, we had several instances of underage registration or people who attempted to change their dates just so that they will fit into the 18 years voting age mandate or requirement. All of those so when we had the press conferences or the public fora, we made sure that we clarified those issues that were discerned during the conduct of the voter registration. By and large, we realized that sustained public education will be helpful, and popularizing the respective legal mandates of the two institutions will also go a long way to build public confidence and trust.
Okay, hold on to that. It's very clear. It's very clear that this relationship can be questioned at any given time. Trust can be questioned at any given time. So we should not just assume that once done, we gained, we're not going to go back on it. So we got to always continue promoting transparency and assuring everybody, because parties could be in power and the law is favoring them. They could be out of power next day, and then they go back and against their position. So it's good that the technical level that you're doing and cooperating is demonstrating its unique values to the country. Hold on to this topic. I want to bring in Mr. Kaitibi and try to understand how did a regulatory authority, maybe you can mention what NaTCA is. It used to be called NatCom at the time, but what NaTCA is, and how did it participate in the development of the National Population Register, which is the foundation upon which your identity system is now operating?
Thank you, Dr. Atick. Thank you, colleagues. I sat here listening to brilliant presentations being done by both the DG and Mr. Swaray. As a regulator, basically we regulate the communication sector. Prior to this, we were only a telecommunications commission. Basically, we regulated the telecommunications space. But I think because of the advances in technology, government thought it fit to revisit that act, and so in 2022, in September, we passed the bill into law, where we were given a bigger mandate of regulating the entire communication space. And so we regulate, we license everything that has to do with communications in Sierra Leone. Now, we are an entity that believes in collaboration, in cooperation, and so we have been working with a lot of entities. IMC, for instance, in this communication space, we provide TV stations and radio stations with the frequencies that they need. And so IMC regulates the content. And so when NCRA in 2017, was doing registration, they engaged the mobile network operators. At that time, there were 3 of them, Orange, Africell, and Seratel, because QCell was new at that time. And so what they engaged them about was to provide them with one coverage map. So what we do is every year, every month or every year, basically we'll ask all operators to provide us with their expansion plans. And so based on the expansion plans, we know exactly where and what we need or where we have coverage. So we provided that coverage map to NCRA, and then NCRA also asked us about, asked the operators to provide them with modems and dongles. Dongles are basically those little bitty MiFis that people use to, So those dongles were used in the registration centers to connect the equipment to the servers. So, all of these things, these are part of the collaboration efforts that we as a regulator did, to make sure that people could register, or could be registered. Also, mostly the operators have a wide, I can call it constituency. Currently, the number of people connected or have, that have these mobile phones is over 8 billion. And so it's a big constituency. So when it comes to SMS blast or when it comes to campaigns, we have been working with NCRA to make sure that these people get the messages that they need, through SMS blast. SMS, basically you send the messages to the phones, for people to, for instance, go to the centers and register. So these are some of the ways we have been working with NCRA.
So you would say the mobile network operators played an important role in driving the foundational identity register to its development?
Yes, certainly. As a matter of fact, as recent as last year, we actually worked with the current ECSL to do the same thing for people to register, to vote. So we used exactly the same idea. SMS blast, using of community radio stations, making sure that people get the messages that they need to get.
To go and register. There's a question actually that somebody raised, and basically said, it's one thing to capture the identity, it's another thing to establish whether somebody is eligible to vote. For example, a foreigner. How did the NCRA, what kind of data did NCRA capture, and what kind of enrichment of that data did the the Electoral Commission have in order to decide if this person gets to vote or not? Ambassador?
What we did, of course, for every registration, to attend to every registrant, you have some credentials, identity credentials that we require, for instance, birth certificates, and where that is not available, we have asked for passport and driving licenses and voter IDs, and where none of those ones not exist, we'll ask for attestation from the traditional authorities in rural communities where facilities may not exist to produce none of those credentials. And so the traditional authorities will provide an attestation for their people just to confirm their identity and their other personal information they will provide. That applied to every other registrant every other registrant in the country. For foreign residents in Sierra Leone, we made sure we access them through diplomatic protocols, the foreign ministry, who in turn requested their respective foreign missions to cooperate with the authority, because civil registration is mandatory, it's compulsory, and it involves everyone, whether you are a citizen or a foreign resident. But it was very clear, and it's still enforced that for every registration, supporting documents are required, because that is a reference for every event that we register, or for everyone that we take account of.
So the NCRA actually has a register of everybody on the territory, not just citizens, but even foreigners in your database.
Yes. We have everyone. We register. The law makes provision for that, for the registration of everyone in this country. No one is left behind, and we make conscious effort to reach to everyone.
And Deputy Ambassador, how do you go about determining the eligibility of somebody who's registered in his database, but maybe there is additional data that you need to impose in order to determine eligibility?
Yeah, on our side at the ECSL, there is a legal condition before you become registered. One, you have to be a Sierra Leonean, and then age 18 at the time of voting. So what we normally do, we extract data from the civil register based on fields. And then maybe I'll need to bring this to your attention. By the time they were establishing the schema for the civil registry, the NCRA and the ECSL work together to make sure all fields that are required for election are embedded in the database schema of the civil registry. And for each and every election, we normally write to the NCRA indicating or verifying that these are the fields that are required for the extraction of data from the civil registration system. What we added in this circle was to be able to distinguish between able and disabled, because in the last circle, that field, though it was captured by NCRA, but the ECSL did not use it. So during the polling, we realized that people went to certain centers and they were disabled. They had some form, so they could not actually access the registration centers. So what we are doing at this time, what we did around, we actually requested NCRA to include the disability component in the fields that will be sent to us. So that data set, we are able to tell you exactly how many centers are disability friendly and those that are not. So that information has also helped the Commission a lot. We even guide them to prepare a ballot, tactile ballots that be for those that are blind, and then build some ramp up certain centers where we have a lot of disability. We got that information also from the NCRA system. But in terms of distinguishing between citizens and non-citizens, in the NCRA infrastructure, there is a unique identifier for every national in Sierra Leone. And when we want to extract, we only make sure that what is tied to citizens of Sierra Leone is what we use to pass as a parameter in our extraction layer. So that should give you exactly Sierra Leonean and non-foreigners in our extracted data.
Okay, hold on one second. There's a brilliant question that somebody asked, and they basically said, in your implementation, does the Electoral Commission duplicate the identity data for their voter roll, or use it as a single source of truth and hence authentication without having to store the same data sets? Do you copy the data from NCRA, or you just validate and you don't copy the same data?
Okay, so that's a very good question. In 2022, last year, we requested a fiber connection to be established between the two institutions. One good thing that keeps the electoral roll consistent with the civil register is that the unique identifier, one of the unique identifiers used at the NCRA, which is called the Citizens Identity Number, which is quite different from the National Identification Number, is also unique. So that's the number that is used at the end of the ECSL. So it means once we have a data set for you, extracted in 2018, for instance, we only extracted those that are not part of our database. In also doing that, there is a catch that if you have a duplicate status, your data will not be extracted from the civil registry. Because we normally look at those that have single existence in the civil registry, and then we extract them. So basically, that's how we do the data extraction. Once you are with us, come the next section, the next registration, we might be maybe lowering that figure, maybe to just 300,000. As we did for this circle, it's just 400,000 that was actually added to what we extracted from the civil registry. And the
long story short, Deputy Ambassador, you do have your own database, that means.
We do not have a database, a data set that is collected by the ECSL. We only have our delimitation database. That is
database of citizens.
No, we don't have a database for the citizens. We have a copy of data extracted from the civil register. That's what we have.
Right. So you have a copy. And
if I may comment, Dr. Atick, the ECSL updates their voter register. What we have now done, in fact, from last year, when we worked together with some support from the UNDP and the Irish Embassy, we've now had an infrastructure that makes sure that anyone turning 18 at any point in time, once you turn 18, your data is transmitted automatically to the Electoral Commission register. So they don't have to wait until 5 years before their data is updated, their voter register is updated. So it's a continuous update of the voter register.
So what do you transmit? What do you transmit to the Electoral Commission?
If, for instance, you have not, Joseph Atick has not been captured before, and today he is captured, and because he is 18 and above, and he is a Sierra Leonean, automatically Joseph Atick is transmitted to the Electoral Commission for the update of the voter register. And what we are working on also now is when there is death, that death is also reported, and that voter register is updated like ours here instantaneously.
Okay, and do you transmit any biometric data to them?
Yes. It's part of the information that is transmitted to the Electoral Commission.
And what do you use that biometric data, Mr. Swaray? What do you use the biometric data that came to you? Because NCRA used the biometric data to deduplicate, so then they can issue a NIN, and then you can also issue a citizen ID number, which is also unique based on the NIN. What do you use the biometric data for that they give to you?
Okay, the biometric data given to the ECSL is just to verify.
Exactly.
It's only for the purpose of verification, not for adjudication and not for deduplication. It's just to verify that this is Dr. Atick.
Okay, so you have the image, photo, and you have a fingerprints to do one-to-one.
Yeah, one to many.
Okay.
But then the most important thing here is we do not store. The ECSL is not actually storing the biometric data on our end, because for every exercise, all we do is just to make sure we verify that indeed this is you. Until when the ID cards are rolled out in good number, we'll not even be extracting biometrics again. We just verify using your NI.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so actually, I want to just very quickly come back before we move on to the next stage in this discussion. I want to underscore something which you have said, the power of important data in creating inclusivity. What I loved in your story is the fact that people who have disability are not being excluded from the voter process because the civil registration process has really identified some of their special needs. And then you made that part of your data that you extracted in order to prepare your centers and the procedure to be welcoming for those with certain disabilities or certain challenges. So I think it's very important to emphasize that cooperation between these two bodies is highly essential, because not only I call it a twinning, because not only does the ECSL benefit from NCRA, but NCRA benefits from the ECSL because it gives motivation for why people need to go and register in the first place. I remember you mentioned to me that in one recent campaign, you added 400,000 people, right?
Yes, in fact, like just to support what he said, Dr. Atick, it was made clear by the ECSL that if you are not on the civil register, you cannot be on the voter register. So that's how we also benefited from the voter register, from the ECSL. And that motivated people. Generally, you'll agree with me that it will spur people to register with the civil registration.
Right. Okay, we're going to continue. Why don't we do this? I want to bring in the next phase, operator, bringing the next phase of individuals who can contribute to this discussion. And we're now need to talk about the steady state, now where we are, and how do we go about identifying some of the gaps and creating the hardware and software infrastructure and going forward. But before we do that, I want to do like a survey of what do you have that we can consider as identity assets today. You can give me an overview of like I have a register, I have cards, I have unique ID number. So maybe Ambassador, you can just orient us by explaining what do you consider as Sierra Leone's identity assets that you can leverage going forward.
Well, we have a very functional legal framework in place to support our identity interventions or projects in Sierra Leone that supports the coordination of agencies involved in identity management. And we have the infrastructure to carry out the enrollment of the population. And we also have a reliable register on our population, comprising citizens and non-citizens. We have the supporting credentials for every enrollment that we have done that are verifiable and are updated on a regular basis. And we have, of course, now the biometric securitized identity cards themselves. We also have introduced securitized identity credentials, that is the birth and death certificates, marriages, divorces. Of course, in the past, those security documents were very much porous and susceptible to fraud. But all of those ones now are assets that we have. We have the technology infrastructure in place to manage critical national data, as well as over 90% of the country's population is now enrolled into the civil register. An asset that we have been able to use to support many government and private institutions in the country in carrying out their respective mandates.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Asset that way.
we'll come back to that in a second. You clearly went from nothing to having a very, very large set of functional assets. In fact, I want to talk to your colleagues about basically, first of all, infrastructure, and clearly as we go into the digital world, what does Sierra Leone need to ensure that this transition to digital world does not become an exclusion? How do we ensure that you've got the coverage? What is the level of coverage, data coverage, etc.? And also, Sierra Leone has been a pioneer in developing digital public goods. So why are you doing that? And where do you see it fitting, given that everything you've done so far was based on a package of software that you either acquired or you have developed internally? It seems that you are redeveloping your infrastructure with a view about the future. So maybe we can hear first a little bit from the Ministry of Information and Communication, and then we can hear also from the Director of DSTI, and then also Mr. Kaitibi, if you can add additional color and experience about what is the infrastructure today and where the gaps are that you're trying to refill. So is Sierra Leone digital ready? Are you ready for a digital future?
I will start with a definite yes, that as a country, we now have the enabling environment to actually say that we are digital ready. And I must say that I have been impressed by how my colleagues have approached the conversation around the whole of government approach to identity management. And as a ministry responsible for ICT, we have also been working towards creating an enabling environment for other government institutions and private institutions to be able to actually embark on their digital journey. So for instance, we have developed the policy environment. There is now currently a national digital development policy that look at the critical pillars of digital transformation, from infrastructure to e-governance to digital skills to digital financial services to emerging technologies, etc., etc. So that policy framework is now what government is using to drive its digital vision. We also have developed a policy around the same framework, looking at the African Union digital strategy for Africa, and also looking at the Smart Africa blueprint for digital economy. So we have those in place. We have also put in place the necessary legal framework. We now have, for instance, NATCOM used to be only a telecom regulator. We have now created a new legal environment that gives them the power to be able to regulate the sector, to create the necessary competition in the market. We have also tried to bring in a lot of resilience by having the Cyber Security and Crime Act, which now give users the assurance that the environment is safe, because there is a means of redress if there is a crime on the digital environment. We are working with NCRA and other institutions to finalize the data protection and privacy bill, which is very core as we are now harvesting. We have seen an increased harvesting of data, not only from NCRA, but from other institutions. So we believe that the Privacy and Data Protection Act is in place. But also when you talk of infrastructure also, I think also I can say that there is a lot of improvement in that direction. We have over 75% 4G coverage in the country, which is strong environment for digital technology to thrive. We have fiber footprint to all but 2 districts in the country. So out of our 16 districts, all of the 12 districts now have fiber terminated. And we have well over 40 what we normally call as a point of presence. That is places where fiber is terminating, and then private sector could be able to leverage or to expand coverage, rural connectivity and things like that. So in terms of infrastructure, also I think we are there. I know my colleague Michala will be talking about digital skills and other innovative things that they are talking about. But to answer your question, yes, from both the policy, legal, and infrastructure-wise, Sierra Leone is ready for its digital journey.
Okay, wonderful. That's a very, very nice overview. Actually, Michala, give us your vision. I mean, you tell us what is DSTI and when was it founded? What is its mission? And how do you see the future, digital future of Sierra Leone, and what are you doing to accelerate it?
Great. And firstly, Joseph, let me thank yourself and the team for giving Sierra Leone an opportunity to be on Spotlight today. Given the aggressive course we have taken in the last couple of years to improve digital identity and the ICT space, generally speaking. Well, the Directorate of Science, Technology, Innovation is a newly established directorate really that came into existence after the new administration came in, simply because of the realization that economies grow because of the efforts and the strides they're making to drive technology innovation. So one of our driving forces really is the National Innovation and Digital Strategy. And why is that? Because that strategy has defined the core philosophy for Sierra Leone, and that's digitization for all. But because this is a very broad concept, it has narrowed it down to 2 specific drivers, that digital identity, the digital economy, and also digital governance. So focusing on the digital identity, it goes beyond the individual, because we're also looking at assets, we're looking at businesses, we're looking at institutions, because if we can't identify people, institutions, and things, we will not be able to make policy decisions to make adequate provision for them. But the question now is, how do we actually go about doing what we set out to do? So as a government, there has to be primary focus on associations, alignments, and building effective partnerships. So as we sit currently, the government of Sierra Leone is actually a co-founder of the Digital Public Good Alliance, and sitting on that board, the government is represented on that board by DSTI. Because at the Alliance, we have processes, procedures, and strategies that are defined to help low and income and middle income states to see how we can actually use technology innovation on an open source basis, open platform, to be able to identify or address specifically challenges or relating to the sustainable development goals. So what we do at the Alliance is to see how, as members, we can bring to granular information to our countries and adopt this so that we will have global best practices, but on a national platform. So being a member of the Alliance, some of the things we have pushed, for instance, is setting up a DPG steering committee in Sierra Leone, which is made up of several different stakeholders, both public sector and private sector stakeholders. Because if we speak to identity, for instance, you find it goes beyond offering public services. There's also private service delivery, that being able to identify the beneficiaries is critical. So one such tool, an open source tool, is the OpenG2P platform. Now, the OpenG2P really offers governments an opportunity to make bulk cash transfers to beneficiaries, especially frontline workers. Now, we all know what it was like when Sierra Leone was amongst the states that were hit with Ebola years ago. And we had situations where frontline workers were not bankable, they did not have accounts. So the question is, how do we make payments that are due these people frontline? So we worked with partners like MOSIP to start working on this tool. So the DPG concept is not entirely new to us. We had such tools, but now we're all looking at them and developing them under the bracket of the DPG. So currently, the OpenG2P tool was used not only for Ebola, but was developed, and blockchains were also built for COVID response. And it's also being used to be able to transfer money to schools under the performance-based system that the government has put in place currently. Now, at the moment, Sierra Leone has 21 DPGs identified, and some of which are already potential DPGs. We also have the DHIS2, which, as we all know, is the health information system. So everything related to health, irrespective of the network or the tools from which the information is sourced, is pushed to the DHIS2 for database decisions to be made, informed decisions to be made at policy level. So DSTI, we worked with several different stakeholders during the COVID-19 to be able to gather information, especially with the private sector, Peak Solutions in particular, to gather information for people coming in and out of the airport. So that really helped us to monitor and see how, to the best of our ability, we can lower the rate of transmission, and all that information, irrespective of the source that it was coming from, was pushed to the DHIS2 so that the ministry was able to make real-time decisions on the transmissions. Now, Rapid Pro is another tool that is being used currently, and especially in the education space. So we have heard the progress that has been made by NCRA for NIN numbers to be issued even to students. But the fact of the matter remains, not every student is registered at school using their NIN numbers. So what we have are sector-based functional IDs that are used to identify these students. And when they take the public exam, for instance, DSTI works with the ministry to see how the results of these exams using their functional IDs, as their school IDs, the results could be pushed to them using USSD services and for free, saving parents a lot of money accessing these results online. Another interesting thing I'd like to mention right now is a tool that has shown a lot of DPG potential, being that it has met some of the standardization criteria for DPG, and that is called the Press Track. So as we all know, of course, we have pregnant women in different parts of Sierra Leone and mostly in locations where they don't have access to the internet. But when these women come into the peripheral health units for service delivery, for services, it is not in all cases they remember their NIN numbers. So what we do through the Press Track, we have system generated numbers. So these women could be registered at the peripheral health units and referral hospitals. They could be given, offered services by the community health workers. And within the 4 planned visits that they're supposed to have for the full trimester of the pregnancy, they still have opportunity to bring in their ID, their NIN numbers, so that it can enhance the database that we are collecting. And this all stems into the neonates that will be monitoring up to age 5, or as the Ministry of Health directs us. So in a nutshell, this is what we're doing currently, and there's a lot more services we are working on, but we're going to be working in partnership with the NCRA, NIMIC, and any other stakeholder that has access to the identification data to ensure we improve on service delivery, not only for the public sector, but for the general citizenry.
Do you establish policies, national policies, such as, for example, data sovereignty and no vendor lock-in? Are you sort of a body that establishes these policies and then pushes the other agencies to understand the meaning and the consequences and to work within them?
Okay, so what we do primarily is champion the ideas and ensure that through wide skill sensitization and collaboration, we have buy-ins. So in relation to the DPGs, what we'll be doing at the steering committee level is start designing some of these internal policies that have to do with vendor lock-in, for instance, that have to do with ensuring that these products offer no harm, not only to the design, but also to the users. And then based on the specificity of it, we would now work with the Ministry of Information and Communication and also with other sector-based entities to see how we can draft on policies that would continue to drive DPG growth and also DPG infrastructure in Sierra Leone.
Now,
if I could just
yes, please,
add to that.
Anybody can add.
We have also worked with Smart Africa and DARF, Digital Impact Alliance of the UN Foundation, to do our data use landscape assessment in Sierra Leone. And the outcome of that assessment was also a recommendation to develop what we are now referring to as a responsible data use policy. So that work is at the tail end of completion, and we hope to popularize it so that, like you're saying, we are able to actually guide the harvesting and use of data. I give you a very good example. Today, in the conversation between ECSL and NaTCA, you see that because they've developed a very good data field between the two institutions, they are able to seamlessly share data. But in most of our institutions, because the data fields are not harmonized, it's a challenge for them to share data. So we're actually working towards, we are trying to work with other stakeholders to see how do we harmonize harvesting of data so that data sharing becomes easy, and then we can now promote the collect once and use many instances of data so that we stop this repeated harvesting of data, the same feed, etc., etc. So that's a work that is also in progress here from the MIC perspective.
Let me come back to Michala and both of you on a topic. I mean, some countries have made, it's a sort of an observation or a criticism sometimes, which basically said that we need to focus on the root problems that we're trying to solve. If it is sovereignty, if it is vendor lock-in, and allow the market to innovate. For example, open source is one approach, but we have seen in open banking and in other fields, open standards could allow the development of modules and the innovators to maintain really innovations and insight, but solving the problem of vendor lock-in by allowing you to swap and putting in a module that will function. Like when I buy a telephone for my house, I don't need to really know the guts inside it. I just want to know that once I plug it in the wall, it is guaranteed to work because of the open standard. I mean, Michala, are we trying to, by focusing only on an open source DPG, are we weakening the world of innovation? I mean, that's a criticism that I've heard just a couple of days ago from some countries. How does Sierra Leone react to that?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, in terms of the reaction, it starts from the point of engagement. When you are engaging service providers, it's also important for you to know what the technology is based on, whether it's open source, for instance, and the open source manual has to be licensed, because at least then you know certain standards and criteria have been met. But at national level, it's also very much important to have the whole of government approach, you know, with the private sector perspective in mind as well, because mind you, you cannot kill innovation. So you really have to ensure that the policies you have, in as much as they're encouraging innovation and digitization, they also have the element of protecting the users from a public perspective, private perspective, and also to ensuring security, given that you never always do have control who the users of these services have to be. So continued collaboration and cooperation, not only from the local level, but also at international level, is really critical to be us to be able to make headway in ensuring we also adopt global best practices and trends.
Right. No, that's absolutely clear. There's a lot here to talk about, and obviously we're limited by time. I want to give the opportunity of the country to show some of the use cases and the high impact use cases, especially in the financial sector and the financial inclusion. And so what we should do, operator, just bring in the rest of the team, and then of course if we have some time, we'll come back and address some of the key questions that what you had to say raised. For example, Ambassador Massaquoi, you have now a foundational identity system, and this foundational identity system was not built for your purposes or your services only. It's built so that every sector in the country can use that. So how do you go about signing up other players in the country? Do you go and sign memorandums of understanding? Do they come to you and you react? Or how do you make NCRA a service provider for everybody?
Yes, thank you very much. That's exactly one primary reason why the NCRA was established, and with the legal provision pursuant to Section 25 of the NCRA Act to support to provide data to other institutions in the discharge of their respective mandates. And we are aware that except until now, we did not have the data protection law in Sierra Leone, but in a collaborative manner, all of us stakeholders involved, we have been able to have a bill with regulations on data protection and privacy in Sierra Leone. In the absence of that, just so that we don't stall the work of others in terms of that may need data on the country's population, we developed or we entered into memoranda of understanding with various institutions. For instance, we had one with the Bank of Sierra Leone to support them in EKYC and for banking operations and credit reference. We also have one with the National Revenue Authority to support them administer tax in the country, which has helped so much in containing tax evasion and other nefarious practices. We also have one with other ID institutions, the immigration.
We'll come back. We'll come back.
Etc., including the National Telecommunications Authority for SIM card in Israel. And
we'll come back to that
they
detail.
Are all on board here.
Yeah, we'll come back to that detail. We want to now drill down. So you're basically saying, you know, we are a service provider. the data essentially is exploited by everybody, not just us. We use it for benefit. And we have a procedure by which we give them access to verify identity and what the authenticity of the data that they're getting. So let us go in and start with the Central Bank of Sierra Leone, with Mr. Philip Bangura, and try to understand how the financial sector landscape has dramatically benefited from the fact that you have a reliable foundational identity now, and what is the consequences to the citizens, I mean, or the people in the country. So talk to us about the role of identity in the financial sector. You are muted.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. We all know the role of identity when it comes to the issue of AML, CFT. It's very important. The bank needs to know who they're dealing with, who their customers. And we've been struggling with that with regards to identity. And it has affected financial inclusion because a lot of people could not access financial services because they don't have a form of ID. And prior to having this agreement with NCRA, you're required to come with receipts to confirm payment of utility bills. And in some apartments, the utility bills are not in the name of the tenant, but rather in the name of the landlord. So it was a big challenge. But now with this, everybody that have an ID number can easily open a bank account. So it has helped greatly. And also the issue of the credit report. It was also done manually. You have to search by name and everything. So now with this ID, we are in good discussion with the World Bank to support us to automate the credit report, which means now you will sit at the comfort of your office and get a credit report rather than send to the central bank, wait for days for you to get a return. It actually slows the process of loan approval. But now with this, the process of loan approval will be done within a minute, because you can just have enter the NIN number and you get the credit report of the potential borrower. So these are all good areas. So it's really, really positive, and it's really helping the banking population.
Now, can the country now imagine a proactive financial inclusion policy where you're able now to give access to banking to even the poor who are not necessarily the clients that the banks want to attract? How do you bring those people? It's not just the fact that you now have them identified. How do you motivate the banks to open up for them and make sure the risk profile is lower, etc.? What is Sierra Leone's financial inclusion policy?
Well, our policy is made up of a lot of things. For example, we have the financial consumer protection guidelines that we issued out, which is meant to educate the consumers and let them know about their rights as well as their responsibility. So it's your responsibility to pay loans, but it's also your right to know what are the terms of the contract, and every document should be read to you in the language that you understand, especially for the women and the vulnerable ones. So we've put that in place. We have also the collateral registry. So if you use a particular asset for collateral, it is registered. And we've encouraged banks to use movable assets as a form of collateral, like a mobile phone, my laptop, my bicycle, my tricycle, vehicle. So all of that is all geared towards allowing the unbanked people to gain access. And fortunately, the microfinance institutions are working wonders. They've penetrated the areas where the big banks refusing to go, and they are actually bringing more people. So the more, and we also have NGOs that are running some, we call it Osusu in our local name, kind of scheme, where it's a small savings scheme for those who don't have access to formal systems. So we have ways of bringing them, graduating them slowly into microfinance institution, community banks, and then finally into the main bank instead. So
the identity, lack of identity is no longer a barrier towards banking, having a bank account. But there are other barriers, is that they may not be bankable because they may not be able to have assets that the bank would require them to have. Obviously, not everybody who has an ID would be accepted in the bank system. I mean, are there anti-discrimination laws in the banking system that says, look, if I met all the criteria, you can't simply reject me?
Yeah, there are no, you don't have to reject anybody, but quite recently we issued a directive which was geared towards women having access to credit, that we make it clear that no financial institution should discriminate against women in terms of access to credit. So that we've made clear, because it wasn't there, but we're also capturing data now to be able to understand if women are really being discriminated against. So we're trying to capture the number of loan applications sent in by women as against the number of successful applicants, so that we're able to see the proportion of women being turned away from this financial institution. So we have an understanding of the problem to actually come up with the right policy to address the issues.
Right.
But most of the banks will tell you, yeah, that they don't discriminate, but we believe there's some level of that happening.
And now they don't have the excuse to say they don't have an identity. You've given them identity. So
exactly.
There needs to be, and that's very important.
That was the key. Yeah, and we're working on the credit report for that to be automated. So you have the credit history of the customer as well as an identity. So it's easy for you to identify them, and it's easy for you to know their character.
And in fact, one other thing that I thought was very good that you do is that you have adopted a sandbox approach. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? Sort of what is your objective of doing that in the fintech, and what has the results been so far?
Well, yeah, now you know the whole world is going fintech, and we as a central bank, we had a challenge providing license for some of them, coming up with product that we don't understand. How do we supervise a product that we don't understand? So we decided to create a sandbox. So we put them within a regulatory boundary for them to operate. So while they operate, we try to understand the product and try to see whether we need to come up with regulations or policy around that product. And after a period within the sandbox, if you're successful, and we believe the product is okay, we understand the product, we can regulate the product well, then we allow you to operate. And we've been graduating a lot of fintech, and that have also helped us understand what is fintech is all about, and what do we need to do as a central bank to be able to match up what they're providing, so that we don't have a consumer situation in the future.
Now that you have digital identity, are you seeing the fintech emergence of peer-to-peer payments, instant payment applications? Are you approving those? And are those primarily coming from the telco sector, or can there be other sectors that can be a peer-to-peer from a mobile device using a feature phone or something? But at the end of the day, they're not offered necessarily by the mobile operators.
Yes, the mobile operators are coming with different products. They now even launched they work with some microfinance institutions to launch a loan scheme. And then we have fintechs that are coming with as a payment aggregator to do most of the payments. So we're seeing a lot coming on. And fortunately, we are almost ready with our national switch, and we'll go live with that. So we expect a lot of fintech to plug in, and we expect the payment landscape to grow large, and we believe things will move greatly. So identity is very important, especially when it comes to these payments. So NCRA, the platform comes in very timely for us to be able to ensure that those platforms are not abused by money launderers or those who support terrorism, so that we
kind of wanted to say.
Yes, I couldn't help but laugh when Philip mentioned the protection they're giving around the sandbox, because we're actually trying to come into that space so we could bring crypto in, simply because we wanted it to use it as a means of revenue generation for the ISPs, because we have a project right now called Project Giga, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the school connectivity. But we needed to use crypto to raise revenue to connect the schools as they continue to increase. We now have close to 12,000 schools. But hopefully, Philip will let us into that box.
Okay,
So we're working on that.
so you heard it. He is going to be friendly to you and letting you into that box.
Sure.
All kidding around. Actually, one thing that I liked about the policy that you have adopted for a bank account opening, you made the NIN, the national identity number, mandatory, but describe to us that friendly approach where you give people 6 months to regularize their situation. Could you please describe, somebody comes in and says, I want to open up a bank account, but you ask for the NIN, they don't have a NIN. What happens?
Yeah. So presently we've made it mandatory for both nationals as well as foreigners, but we've given a time space, meaning I can go and open an account without the national ID, but I'm given a period of 6 months to bring in the national ID. Otherwise, I will not be able to access my account, so that you have enough time to go to the NCRA and get your ID. Unfortunately for us, NCRA have decentralized their office, meaning you can go anywhere and easily get your ID. You don't have to.
And I don't know.
Ambassador, we've lost Philip.
To Freetown, get your ID. So that makes it much more.
Right.
And just to add to that, Dr. Atick, in addition to the decentralized service, we have made sure that you are issued a registration slip after your registration, and that slips, and you have your NIN. So everyone that has registered, the over 90% that has registered with us, has enrolled in our database, has an NIN that is on the slip that we issue to him on her. We are aware that some people may have lost their slips, or they may not have had it in a safe, somewhere safe for them. What we also did is that we provided registration certificates for those ones that needed the NIN that did not have that may have lost their NIN, just so that they find it easy to access services that are tied to the NIN in the country.
Yeah, I'll come back to the issue of the credential at the end, but I actually want to understand how the NIN is changing the revenue authority's business practices. So I'm just going to give Mrs. Bangura the opportunity to share with us sort of what happened after the NIN has become part of the culture and people's daily lives.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joseph, and it's a delight, to be here, to participate on this forum. And as Michala said, for, you putting a spotlight, giving us a spotlight to really tell the world what we have been doing in Sierra Leone. And evidently, we have done so much. So we at the Revenue Authority, we are mandated to assess and collect revenue to support government activities. And we strive to do that in the most efficient way, not only for us as an institution, but most importantly, for the taxpayer as a whole. Prior to the many reforms that we have embarked on, we operated in a very manual system. So we required, in order for you to be a part of our system as a taxpayer, you're required to have a taxpayer identification number. Now, in that manual form, the systems were so antiquated and so siloed that it was difficult to operate in that environment. And of course, the confirmation of the TIN number was really more of a name check than a bio data. So starting 2018, we embarked on massive reforms in all of our departments, be it the domestic tax department, customs, non-tax, you name it. So we started with the domestic tax department, where we automated the way we register, taxpayers registered, filed their taxes online, and also made payment online. But what we noticed in the manual form, because the systems were antiquated and they stood alone, what taxpayers used to do, they would register with a team, and after a while, and after racking up a lot of liabilities and they are unable to pay, they will go ahead and open another business. So we wanted to find a way, how do we mitigate? How do we stop that practice? So we realized that in order for us to be able to control that, we will have to use the NIN as the unique taxpayer identification number. So while we were automating the system with the ITAS, we reached out to the Director General for for NCRA and asked, how do we collaborate to just make sure that our two systems will communicate? Because we also wanted to remove that human aspect, whereby a taxpayer will come and then get the number and go back and forth. So we spoke to DG, and then we decided that we have our two systems communicate by integrated. So when you come to the NRA to register as a taxpayer or to update your information, instead of you going back to the NCRA to get slip or get receipt, the systems will just communicate, and using your NIN number, we will confirm, or otherwise, confirm who you are as a taxpayer. And this practice has really helped a lot, because once we use the NIN to create a TIN number, which we use in all of our systems, be it at domestic tax department or customs when you're clearing your goods, all of our systems communicate with each other. And then it makes life easier, as I said, not only for us, but for the taxpayer. And, it really has, over the last 2 years that we have implemented our systems, it has reduced cost for compliance, which for us really, that is the overall. And it has also reduced not only the cost of compliance, but even the face-to-face interaction between the taxpayer and us as the tax authority. So, and we'll continue to work on that. And, and all the other reforms that we are doing, we make sure that the NIN is in the center of all of the verifications that we do for our taxpayers.
Let me underscore the fact that you're actually tokenizing the NIN in a way, because the NIN is used to generate the TIN, the TIN. So the TIN is the financial identifier, and it's derived from the NIN, but in fact, they're not using the NIN directly. Exactly. And that's an important thing, because people might worry about a health sector knowing about the financial sector and all of that. Fantastic stuff. Very quickly, I'm going back to Mr. Daniel Kaitibi, and try to understand, what did the NIN do to the telecom sector for the SIM? Now we're talking about another token, which is the SIM.
Thank you, Doctor. I tell you, the NIN has been a lifesaver for us in this sector. As we had in 2019 or 2020, we passed the regulation on SIM registration. Basically, in that regulation, we said an individual, there are a couple of parameters that we were looking at, including how you can actually get a SIM. You'll be surprised. In it, we have what they call even a community leader can actually, vouch for you as a citizen. So, but what this NIN has done for us is basically it has helped us clean up the system. So now we instructed people to, before you can actually get a SIM card, you need to have that NIN. So the NIN is like the unique identifier, is the primary key that we're using to make sure people get SIM cards. Yes, initially there was a serious, pushback. Yes, people were complaining, oh, this will affect ABC, people don't need to go back and register, but no. I found out since we started this NIN and SIM integration, we found out a drastic reduction in fraud. Philip is there. Philip knows that mobile money fraud is very, very, very predominant and prevalent in this country. And so NIN is actually is a lifesaver. Once we fully integrate the databases of the operators with NCRA using API, we'll now see that we'll start cleaning up gradually, because the law is clear that an individual should only be allowed to have 3 SIM cards, 3. But we found out that people in this country will actually get sometimes over 10 SIM cards, because there was no proper way of identifying these people. But currently the NIN is actually helping us.
But in fact, this is another example of where there's a twinning going on, because in a way The NIN is helping you with the SIM, but also since the SIM requires the NIN, it motivates people to go and get the NIN. Just like we have heard from the Electoral Commission, the Electoral Commission is a driver and a motivator for getting people to enroll and register. This is what makes registration successful. It's not the absence of applications that are high impact, but the presence of those applications. People say, why do I need my NIN? Because you have a lot of services that are going to be linked to it. I mean, we don't have time to cover them. Education, health. You're moving into a world where the health, social protection, and safety net payments, civil service reform, military and police service reform. I mean, we can go on and on. You've created in such a short period of time, by going this foundational route, a real revolution in changing how services are provided inclusively into the country, and based on basically you've got now the foundation to adopt other policies that will make people's lives better and empower them more. I want to end with one controversial thing and challenge this group with it. And basically, that's the ID card, the biometric ID card, which has been misunderstood in the news. So let me ask the question, and we're going to end here with that. Do I need a biometric ID card? If I do, can I afford it? And if I cannot afford it, what are the other ways are you thinking to make it affordable to people? So let's just start with the first issue. Do you need a physical smart ID card to give to the citizens? You have the NIN, you have a digital ID. Anyone?
Yes,
Yes. I would say yes, you need a smart-based identity for various reasons. One, there are a lot of needs for identity, whether it's for driver license, whether it's for crime and things like this. So if you have an identity that stores multiple information, then it also saves a lot of government, a lot of resources to produce multiple identity. For instance, if you have a smart ID system, then they will even reduce the need for driver's license, because once you slot my ID card, maybe my driver information status will come up, even tax status will come up, etc., etc. So that's why I will support the need for a smart digital identity system.
Okay. Ambassador.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Atick. Yes, you need the biometric ID, and because everywhere, even in the US, you have a physical ID, and that also adds to the means of identifying you easily when you carry it, where you may have challenges in accessing the system that identifies you using technology. But importantly, what has been the key thing here is its affordability and accessibility. In the past, accessing or acquiring ID cards in Sierra Leone was very much challenging, where it was more or less centralized in the capital city, where you will have to move some 200-300 kilometers to Freetown, the capital, to have your ID. But what we have done now as a government is that we have decentralized that service, where you do not need to move from your home district, your location, to come to Freetown, the headquarters, to have your ID. Government has taken it to your doorstep. You are in 200 miles away from this capital city. You'll have your ID there. All you need is just report to the NCRA office. We are everywhere in the country. You apply for your ID, the type of ID, the category of ID you want, and you can have it there. Moving it, when you compare the movement of people from their locations to Freetown to acquire ID with the services that are now available at their doorstep, the cost of it, and you look at the cost of the ID card, you will say it's reasonable and affordable. Consciously, as a government, I told you, I know it's less than, it's about $5, and with 5 years duration for the national ID. We have 3 categories of ID cards. We have the national ID card. That's what I told you is but 5 years duration. We have the ECOWAS ID, because ECOWAS is an ECOWAS protocol that requires ECOWAS member countries to produce ID cards, identity for its nationals, or for ECOWAS people to be able to travel freely within ECOWAS countries without any let or hindrance, as well as promote trade integration within the ECOWAS countries. That category of ID card is available because we are complying with the ECOWAS protocol. And so far, since the protocol was done, Sierra Leone is the 6th country out of 15 or 16 countries in Africa that has complied or adopted the ECOWAS protocol. And that, but the ECOWAS ID is on demand. It's when you need it, when you want to travel, if you need to travel and you don't have a passport, then you can have your ID, where you can move to Nigeria from Sierra Leone without ID, without passport. So that is on demand. It costs also, it's both for Sierra Leoneans who want to travel and other ECOWAS nationals residents in Sierra Leone. Then there is also another category of ID card that is for the non-national, that's for the foreign residents.
Yeah, that I understand.
That one is also needed, very serious. It's a primary requirement for acquisition of resident permit as well as work permit in Sierra Leone. Right. Because before you acquire your permit, you must be registered, you must be identified.
Right. I understand, Ambassador.
And of course, we have the ID verification platform. So when you have the card and you present yourself anywhere for any service, for instance, you report to immigration, you want the ID, an immigration opportunity there, then you also have the identity will be verified from the main platform that we have at the NCRA. This is a move towards digital ID.
Ambassador, let me just close by saying the elephant in the room, of course, is the ID card for elections. So, Deputy Ambassador, do you need an election ID card, or can this biometric ID card serve as the electoral card?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things we would like to actually move to come the other elections, because if you just consider how much it costs the ECSL to produce ID cards that are only meant for voting, it's a huge amount of money that is spent every 5 years. Right. And not just the cost of the card being printed, but the cost involved in actually distributing these cards to the voters is a very huge amount. So the intention of the commission is how best can we leverage on the national ID card that have been issued by NCRA for subsequent voter registration activities. We don't intend to be printing voter ID cards. That's the commission stand come 2028. But then, if citizens are paying for the card, in our last discussion, we said, if the ECSL estimate, say currently the ID cards we are procuring is about $1.3 to $1.4 million. So if you have that amount, and then also looking at how much it's going to cost the ECSL to train, to deploy, hire vehicles, you pay over 6,000 staff. Putting all of those resources together, combining with the cost of the ID card, I think if that amount is paid off directly to the vendor who is producing these ID cards, then the NCRA can give ID card to citizens, and then the government intend to pay. At the end of the day, the ECSL will only use those cards and give them voting stickers, and that's what we use to vote. So the ECSL in the future may not actually need to print cards for voters. That's
fantastic. Fantastic. All good things have to come to an end. Unfortunately, I wish I could give more time, but this has been a wonderful session. We're so proud of all of you. I think Sierra Leone has really demonstrated. What I like most about you is that you've gone beyond just enrollment. You've created the identity verification platforms that are adapted to the state of development of the population, their availability and access to digital tools. And then you've created a whole slew of services that rely on the foundational identity, and therefore they motivate the demand for of identity, and they consume the identity. So bravo for everything you've been doing. We look forward to hearing more along the road from you. I know there is a session at the AGM where we are going to look at how digital identity in Sierra Leone is helping financial inclusion and other social aspects. So this will be in physical event, but down the line, later in the year, as you make more progress, we will look to bring you back and hear about it, especially about the proposal that the Deputy Ambassador has really raised, and that really is intriguing, which is the idea of use some of the budgets that come from the election cost, save that money and invest it in giving people more permanent identity and more permanent credentials and proofs of identity. And with that, unfortunately, I have to close. I thank you once again, and we're now ready to move to the next segment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome the next segment, next speaker. I believe we have two speakers that are going to be for our guests from Sierra Leone. If you are able to answer some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A section, which we could not take online, that would be fantastic. So I'd like to welcome Famoco, the CEO, Lionel, Baraban, and Andréa Muller, who are going to actually talk to us about something also intriguing, which is the emergence of essentially a humanitarian stack, digital stack, which has demonstrated its ability to be interoperable and therefore serve multiple applications and multiple humanitarian organizations. So I don't want to take any more of your time. Lionel and Andréa, the platform is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for us to be here. It's an honor to be here. The first session was just unbelievable, very interesting, and I hope we'll be up to the level. So Andréa is here with us. Andréa is our product manager, business intelligence and identity. Andréa, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. Yes. So nice to meet you, and I will be glad with Lionel to present you our experience on digital identity.
Okay, so let me share my slides. Okay. Is it clear for everyone? Yes, I guess it is. So we're going to talk today about digital identity convergence and what we call the emergence of a humanitarian digital stack. Okay, now, to start with, government NGOs are facing complex challenges. And what we see in those challenges in the humanitarian world is we are going from a world where we used to fight hunger, where we are fighting extreme poverty. And I want to say that hunger is not over yet, but the focus today is on fighting extreme poverty, and the needs might be slightly different. So the challenges are humanitarian conflicts, migration issues, natural disaster, rapid urbanization, climate change, and each time when we help NGO, the issue is how you get in, and also we'll talk at the end of the presentation also how you get out of a country, and what building block a humanitarian or NGO coming is really living in the country. So of course, what we say is that the solution is the digitalization. Now, what do we mean exactly by digitalization? So, of course, it's becoming paperless. So when we say becoming paperless, we're talking about e-voucher. If we talk about WFP, we'll talk about WFP in a minute. But e-voucher are not enough. You need to enroll people. So it's a KYC that brings to digital identity, biometric verification. Now, of course, all those solutions needs to be accessible everywhere and at any time. So those solutions needs to work online and offline. because generally in those countries, you have a good internet connection in the big cities, in the capital, but in the rural areas, it might be not the case. So being online and offline is a key element. And also you need to monitor accurately. You need to create traceability. What we all often say is what we bring when we digitalize cash-based transfer, voucher, whatever, the traceability we bring is the key factor to really provide valuable information to the NGO and to the donors. And of course, we need also to protect data privacy via encryption. And when we say about data privacy, we'll say a word about that later in the presentation. It's not only the data we're talking about, but also the digital trace that we're talking about, which is the metadata created in those digitalization process. So if you do all that, then we can talk about the emergence of a humanitarian digital stack. And why we call it a stack is because it's the idea of the stack to be reusable in other process. So the vision, and here as an example, we're going to talk about what we do as an implementing partner for WFP, the World Food Program. I'll talk about Scope, CODA, and which are two programs of WFP. Is really, and the vision is really about trying to save the life of millions of vulnerable people. And so the program needs to be global program, huge program, talking about a huge amount of people, but at the end, we are treating individual, and we need to treat them as individual people. And the condition to do that is to be field driven. What we mean by field driven is you need to do that on the field, on the ground, in the rural areas. We need to be, it needs to be a case management system, deep field ready. It needs to support decision making. And those programs need to work with partners other than WFP. So to open the system to different partners, and sometimes to integrate with a government system. What I want to say is when we talk about being field driven, the fact that you change, you go from a food stamp, a paper voucher, to a card that you give to beneficiaries, that creates a sense of a pride. And the way people see the beneficiaries as consumers and not anymore as beggars is a key element to the dignity of those people and to the integration of those people and sometimes of those camps into the local areas. So being global, but address the people individually. Now, how does the program work? It starts with enrollment. The enrollment in most of the case are biometric enrollment. Why is it biometric enrollment? Because as we've just heard in the previous presentation, to enroll someone biometrically is a way to make sure that the people you enroll are the people that you'll see later at a merchant level or at a hospital or whatever service the NGO will provide, but you don't need any other form of identification. The first form of identification is the biometry of the beneficiary. And then country by country, if you need perhaps later on to provide more papers, but the first one is you enroll people and you're able to do that quickly. And the only thing that is needed at the first time is just the biometric. Then we deliver a smart card, which will be, in that case, a mix between an identity card and a payment card. Then, of course, we need to manage the rights of the beneficiaries, to issue rights. And then the beneficiary will go to a shop or to a distribution center to get the goods they're entitled to. So here, in that case, it's really like if I say, okay, I give you $100, but inside the money, I can write that this money is usable only for several type of goods. So I can say that I give you $100, but I write inside the money that this is usable only for vegetable, fruits, oil, sugar, whatever. So there are lists, can go up to 19 goods. You can set up free cash, and you can create also other types of certain boundaries. So for example, you can say, this money is usable only in the 20 kilometers around that village or in that migration corridor pack. Or you can say that money is usable in the 20 next day, because if you don't use the money will be relocated to someone else. So if you put good rights, so you have a good way to understand and to manage the usage of those funds. So of course, then the beneficiary will go on a shop, will tap the card on the terminal, will be identified biometrically, and a card, it can be used by one person or a family. On one card, you can put the fingerprints of the mom and perhaps several kids, so they can go shopping as well. And all that creates reports, a trace, and a better way for the NGO to manage their e-voucher system. So with that system in particular, we do three things: cash-based transfer. The second one is identification, and the third one is supply chain. So it's one single system that can do cash-based transfer, identification, and supply chain. So that's some example of what we do on the field. In that example, we are talking about South Sudan. And okay, so what we've seen up to now is really how we organize the system. But now, if we talk about humanitarian digital stack, the idea really is we've given some cards to beneficiaries. We've given some digital POS or digital devices to merchants and to local organizations to enroll people. And now, if we talk about interoperability, there are two levels of interoperability. One level of interoperability is on the terminal itself, and one is on the card. So what we see in our deployment is, if you have one terminal given and you have a network of acceptance of hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of terminals given to merchants, to agents, to local organizations, those terminals can be used to serve the beneficiary population, WFP beneficiary population, but they can also be reused to create a social safety net, a government organization. For example, we're working with PayCode, that is, I'm going to talk in a few sessions about a biometric payment scheme. So we've deployed in several countries biometric payment scheme using PayCode technology. So on the same terminal, you can have PayCode technology, central national medical assistance, transport, supply traceability. So you KYC for telcos. So on the same terminal, you create the interoperability just by simply adding new application on the terminal. And the interoperability is not done on the cloud level, but it's done on the terminal level. On the same idea is on the card. So on the card, you can use closed loop payment system as we do for WFP, but you can also put together on the same card an open loop, a Visa or MasterCard applet, and a closed loop. You can put e-switch from a pay code and WFP. So the idea of having a card on which you can install different applets serving a different type of population and or serving the same population on different needs, that's what we see and what we call building blocks of a humanitarian digital stack. I'll hand the mic to Andréa to talk a little bit about data. Andréa, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Lionel. So behind the scene, this digital track enables organizations to collect and process accurate data from the field. But why is that so critical, and especially for NGOs? What good data quality enables organizations to accurately assess the needs of communities affected by crises or disasters, and then to prioritize their response efforts and allocate resources where they are the most needed. With accurate data, they can ensure that the aid is delivered in a timely and effective manner. High-quality data is also necessary to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of humanitarian interventions. It allows organizations to track progress towards the goals, identify areas for improvement, and make evidence-based decisions on how they adjust their programs, and they can demonstrate their impacts and build trust with the communities they are supporting. So in summary, good quality data is essential for ensuring that humanitarian activities are effective, efficient, and accountable. And indeed, when we speak about data, and especially about data privacy, we think about the privacy of personal data, such as biometric information, medical histories, financial details, and so on. Of course, the privacy of such data is critical, but not only. When someone interacts with a digital touchpoint, such as a device, traces are generated, such as the geolocation of the terminal when the transaction has been made. The privacy of such information is also very critical, as it could be used against populations. It could be, for example, to geolocate a refugee camp, as an example. We don't want to add any additional threat to these vulnerable people. And then that's why data privacy is critical to build trust and confidence between organizations and their beneficiaries. If beneficiaries feel that their personal information is not being adequately protected, they may be reluctant to seek assistance from the NGOs or provide information that is essential for the organization to serve them effectively. And to sum up, what we saw is that this humanitarian stack are building blocks to multi-services and sustainable digital touchpoints. The very same digital components, such as terminals and cards, can be used to accept payments, to monitor and track supply chains, to enroll safety net beneficiaries and telco customers, and also even to validate transport tickets.
Thank you very much, Andréa. I see that Dr. Atick is already here. So, I mean, we're late. I see you, Dr. Atick. So that was our last slide. You're exactly right on time.
Thank you. Actually, I want to close your segment by congratulating you on the pragmatism by which you solved really, or you approached really three important pillars of the scalability, the scaling of a solution, the interoperability, and of course, the data empowerment. Quite often we hear about solutions where in order to do any one of these three, let alone all three, you have to throw everything out and start over again. And you start even writing code and opening up the code and doing all sorts of things. The important thing is we do not have time to do this. We have to make progress forward because the people who need us are actually suffering, and any delay in making a difference in their lives is an opportunity lost. So I really like what I'm seeing here because of the pragmatism of it. And so congratulations for that. And of course, I encourage people to connect with you and have more conversations. Unfortunately, we ran out of time with this segment. I need to move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, operator, please bring in the next segment where we're going to focus about another very interesting topic, which is the question of decentralized identity for basically service delivery, because we sort of been told that the only way we can really deliver services would be to have a centralized registry against which we can authenticate, and that's not necessarily the case. Obviously, many of the social protection practitioners find this disturbing. So let us move into a world where maybe we can do something that by design protects the privacy of people. And so here with us is going to be Eloise De-Tassigny from Gravity. Tag teaming with her is Priyanka Patel from the Kenya Red Cross Society, who will tell a very interesting story about how the technology will work and how it has been put to use by the Red Cross. So, Eloise.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Eloise De-Tassigny, and I'm the business lead at Gravity, based out of Nairobi, Kenya. And today I'm going to be talking to you about a decentralized identity solution for humanitarian aid. So let's start with a little overview of the state of identity and access to basic services. So nowadays, there is 850 million individuals in the world that do not have an official proof of identity. However, if you do not have an identity, basic services are inaccessible and prevent individuals from growing both economically and socially. They cannot access humanitarian aid, social protection, cannot have access to land registration, and sometimes even medical care. There is also around 80 million of forcibly displaced people in the world, and this number more than doubled in the last 10 years. And over 2 billion people are excluded from accessing financial services, of which 57% live in Africa. And we also see a gender gap persisting, and women are overall 8% less likely to have an official ID. But as you probably all know in this call, it's one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals for everyone to have an ID by 2030. And in parallel of all these numbers, we see humanitarian aid organizations that are following a huge digitalization trend that has been accelerating since COVID. And one of the things that they're testing is digital identity solutions. However, a digital identity layer can sometimes bring concerns, especially some centralized digital identity solutions that face challenges that lead to data insecurity and fraudulent identity, such as highly concentrated databases that become honeypots for hackers, sharing more data that is needed, which leads to low data privacy. There's also duplication of entries and lack of portability, as most organizations create their own identity solutions. We see also identity thefts, and data subjects are becoming the product. And as an example, the average cost of data breach in the healthcare industry is about $11 million. So thankfully, we have tools to empower people through decentralized identity. And the goal of decentralized identity is really to bring individuals back in control of their personal data. So in traditional identity systems, individuals often have limited control over their personal information. It's typically stored and controlled by central authorities, such as governments, corporations, social media platforms that share those information on behalf of individuals. And organizations are the one sharing this information. So this leads to issue like the one I just studied before, such as data breaches, identity thefts, and misuse of personal information. And those data are also usually stored in silos, which can be extremely inefficient. So with decentralized identity, the goal is to put the individual back in control of their personal data. So the data subject is the one sharing and granting access to their information to organizations that do not have to store this data. So the way it works is that individuals are really in the center of the picture and they can control their data. They receive and they can share information about themselves without the need of a centralized authority. So they receive verifiable credentials from trusted sources into a wallet that can then be shared with other organizations in order to access a service. And decentralized identity creates a more secure, transparent, and user-centric identity systems that empower individuals to control their own personal data and digital identity. So now let's take an example of a Red Cross beneficiary, for example, that will need to use an identity credential for a cash transfer. So in a decentralized identity ecosystem, you have the data subject. So in this case, it's going to be the Red Cross beneficiary. Of an issuer, which in this case is going to be the Red Cross, and a verifier, which in this case is going to be the money vendor responsible for distributing the cash. So the subject or the beneficiary has a decentralized digital identity wallet, and they can request credentials about themselves to different trust sources, such as in this case, the Red Cross. And the Red Cross can issue those credentials into the wallet of the beneficiary for them to use in the future. And then a money vendor, for example, who needs to identify a beneficiary to see if they meet the criteria to get the cash transfer, can request a proof of authentication to this beneficiary. And then this beneficiary can use its wallet and verifiable credentials to just share those ones with a money vendor that can trust the document in itself and does not even need to know about the issuer. The credential in itself with the cryptographic technology and the blockchain behind it is a good enough source to be able to trust. And the decentralized technology that we're using in this solution ensure that personal data is secure and under the control of the individual. So decentralized identity provides individuals with the ability to selectively disclose information to different parties, allowing a greater privacy and control over their personal data. So at Gravity, we provide such a decentralized identity platform, which empower individuals and data subjects to own, control, and securely share private verifiable data on a need-to-know basis through a digital wallet. So we built this platform to allow individuals to receive, store, and share verifiable data through the use of a digital wallet. And we respect standards to guarantee interoperability between different organizations. And our solution is easily integrable to organizations' existing systems through simple APIs. So the individuals is in control of their credential and can decide on the when and under which circumstance to share this information to access a service. And the data is stored either on their private device or on a secure decentralized storage system. So this enables a quick and easy sharing of verifiable data, saving time and money both to individuals and organizations. And decentralized identity can improve the user experience and reduce duplication efforts as it creates these trust ecosystems peer-to-peer between individuals and organizations. So users can use our wallet via a web application, just as you can see on the slide. If they have a smartphone, a USSD menu if they just have a basic phone, or a QR code if they do not own a phone. So now that you know a little bit more about decentralized identity, let's talk about how it's used in the humanitarian aid sector to help maximize the impact of humanitarian aid program and empower individuals, such as beneficiaries. So it's inclusive, as I just mentioned, as it's able to be used through a smartphone, basic phone, and even no phone with QR codes. And it's been tested in remote locations in the field where usually access to the internet and electricity is pretty limited. So the way our solution is being used is that NGOs create and share credentials to beneficiaries, such as identity, health information, diplomas, certificates, etc. And then beneficiaries control their own data and decide to share those credentials to access services such as a cash transfer using an identity credential to authenticate themselves and prove their eligibility. And then service providers such as other NGOs or money vendors can verify those credentials, trust the information in it, and then just give out the service. So the solution has been used in the DIGIT program, which is Dignified Identities in Cash Assistance. So Pranka Patel here from the Kenya Red Cross is going to talk to you a little bit more about this project just in a second. But before, I'm going to tell you about how our solution has been used to give access to health services and to better social protection in Kenya. So one of the features of decentralized identity is that it's programmable and composable. So any identity information needed to give access to a kind of service can be added on top of just simple identity information, such as name, age, nationality, diploma. So that's what we did here with this project. And by sending credentials to patients with their digital health records, to just improve efficiency and give them a better experience when they receive care. So this project was carried out in Kalobe Kakuma refugee camp in the Turkana, which is a northern region in Kenya, which is home to more than 200,000 people. And here we targeted patients with non-communicable diseases for who continuity of care is absolutely critical. However, in these health facilities, they were manually processing health records, making it difficult to keep a record of people, information, and then track their progress through their treatment. And also, no digital record is issued to migrants, patients, when they move from one country to another, which can lead to like stopping the treatment or just their physical records being just lost or damaged. We have also the concern of affordability, as patients who keep their record on a manual notebook sometimes do not have the money to afford that notebook. And then if they do not have it or lose it, then it just stops their treatments and becomes a barrier for them to access medical services. So the way we did it in this case is that those NCD patients, non-communicable disease patients, would receive from the Kenya Red Cross their digital records with their diagnosis, what treatments they were getting, if they have any medical history. And this information could then be shared through a QR code to whichever doctors they would go to in whichever health facility organized by the Kenyan Red Cross. So doctors could have the confidence to get the right information they needed for diagnosis, and then could better track patients' treatment and just provide the best care possible. So the results that we got from these pilots in Kalobe were very promising. They included digital identity to enable beneficiaries to track current prescription and doctor notes, and also enable people without an ID to still receive medical care and humanitarian assistance, while helping NGOs and medical facilities process patients quicker, since they have all information that is needed to easily just give the right treatments. So now we're working on onboarding other organizations locally to benefit from the interoperability of our solution. So now I'm going to let Franca talk a little bit about cash transfers.
Thank you, Eloise. I'm just going to introduce a little bit about the digital solution, but also dignified identity in cash, as well as a little bit about, touch a little bit on health. And good evening from me here in Kenya. It's now 7 p.m. And thank you so much, Eloise, for the introduction on the same. I'll just request to go next. So this is a program that has been piloted since the year 2018, and it has been piloted within the same, within Kenya, but different community settings. Next, one of them has been in the informal settlement, but then the two very close ones, in the recent years has been in the refugee camps. It has been something that is very close to the Kenya Red Cross because of the challenges that we face when it comes to operations on ground. Most of the times when it comes to humanitarian services and humanitarian response, when you're working with the community, you want to give solutions that are sustainable, not just the solutions that are here to fix the problem for now, but then when you wake up tomorrow, this problem is still existing. So cash voucher assistance is a solution to do just that, to bridge the gap. It's basically us giving them that empowerment or that power and chance to make a choice of what it is that they need to procure or reach out to for them to solve the problems that they're facing. So food could not be the only aid that they need. They also need shelter, they need transportation, pay for school fees, buy medication, and cash voucher assistance is able to do that. It's able to make them take lead on that choice of what is most important for them in that situation. When the Kenya Red Cross or any national societies on ground doing cash disbursement, it is very mandatory for the beneficiary to own a phone with a SIM card, a functional SIM card, for them to receive the cash. So as much as it's called cash, it's not hand in cash. It's mobile money that is then transferred to them using the local service provider, which is Safaricom, to give them M-Pesa. For us to disperse M-Pesa, we need them to have the SIM card. And for them to have a SIM card, they need to have a national ID, because according to the KYC rules and regulations, but also the ministry, you're not allowed to have a SIM card or be in possession of any M-Pesa numbers if you do not have access to a national identification card, which means the community or the beneficiaries that don't have any of this documentation are at a disadvantage of receiving cash during disasters. What do I mean by this is, in the humanitarian space, we treat every individual in that disaster situation equally, regardless of what background or regardless of what documentation they may be in possession of or not be in possession of. But it becomes very hard and challenging for us to respond and support them with M-Pesa when they don't have these documents or these devices. So what we do is we do an airdrop. We take a bulk amount of the cash and distribute it to the nearby merchant, who then is able to give out hand in cash to the beneficiaries that were not able to get SIM cards. It's a very tedious exercise, but in the whole process, you are seeing that it is all trickled down to this one problem of not having a national ID or any form of identification that can be recognized. So this project was a pilot in 2018, where we did this pilot within the cash context. And we tried to experiment and see, if we register people using the platform that Gravity helped us design, are we able to create an identification for the beneficiaries that they can use to come to the Kenya Red Cross and say, this is our identity, can we then get cash? We did the pilot. It was supported by the Norwegian Red Cross, Norwegian Refugee Council, Church Aid, as well as the Save the Children Norway. And in this, after that, we now moved the entire pilot to scale it into Uganda and see how would this look like in a different country, in a different context. It is not something that is meant to replace the national ID. It is not here to compete with the national ID. But the whole idea is, when it comes to humanitarian services, you're able to use a universal or at least a central ID that allows us to offer services. And this is the whole component and concept where we now bring in the advocacy of bringing in more partners to recognize this identification document. So you don't have the whole process of re-registering on people. So next, please. And the objective has been very simple from this entire pilot that we've been doing. We're now in the health context as well within the refugee settlement. And when you use the word refugee, when you use the word migrant, it is self-explanatory that they are in that situation because they don't have any documentation that can help them or support them in getting permanent residence or legal rights. And when you don't have any documentation, you're not just strapped off the rights to education, healthcare, and all of that, but even to access humanitarian aid. It becomes a much more, I wouldn't want to say the word exploit, but also much more exhausting affair for both ends. So the objective of this has always been for us to allow beneficiaries get more access, but ownership. It's all about how you give them that ownership. Nobody can touch my ID unless I want them to touch it. Nobody can use my data unless I give consent to use it. So the system actually needs the beneficiary to intervene, give us the permission to access their data. So at any point, we're not able to just log in and retrieve your data and then share it out. So it even protects the whole data protection policy for the beneficiary, but also for the organization that is able to then implement this kind of solutions. It is one that doesn't need strong internet connectivity. It's very simple. You just need basic internet infrastructure and also the software that is installed for you to then register and then have them printed out. You give it back to them and they just use their phones now to give you the access codes. So it's very simple, less low connectivity areas. In fact, in our pilot, I don't think, apart from the first pilot where we were actually doing an implementation and learning from it, where the challenges then were fixed, is there's no problem with the internet in this scale of the work. It's a solution that we want to create that is interoperable. So if we have health clinics, if we have UN agencies, if you have Kenya Red Cross, if you have private sector hospitals, all wanting to offer health services or cash assistance to one beneficiary, that he or she doesn't have to go to all 5 organizations and re-register his or her identity all over again. It allows that person's identity to reflect every time he walks in or she walks into that facility. It's not that data is being shared across networks and then it's all out there in the open. It's the beneficiary that carries his data along with him when he goes to these sites. Next, please. I'll just quickly jump through. And how this is done is we do a data collection. So we call beneficiaries in. We basically ask them for their information. We first incept them on what this is meant to do. It's a whole process that Kenya Red Cross does, from inception to sensitization to introduction to being able to understand it and then accepting it. We do a data collection after that. We create for them the identification, generate for them the pins which they go back with, and then issue them with a QR form. The QR code is then the one that we scan to access their information. The verification is then most of the times eligible for them to go to the centers at any point. If they lose, next please, if they lose their card, they're able to regenerate a new QR code, and we're able to still give them access to services. So I've talked a little bit about the use cases in Kenya and Uganda, but also it's something that Save the Children has done in terms of cash assistance for households. Most of the times, even as I mentioned, we do cash assistance. Save the Children's case has been around drought. It's been around children, protecting children rights, but also risks. We have some pilots and projects with the Global Fund as well, where we do disbursement of cash to the child that is of age in a household that is not stable with a single parent or isn't fully available or isn't present. We give the assistance to the child, and we also incept on how to handle the cash and how to protect it. We have volunteers on ground who are able to do door-to-door visits to ensure that the cash isn't violated or misused in the process. And this identification then helps us create that data coverage of sensitivity. In the health context, what we've done is we've created NCD database of he or she is a diabetic patient or has hypertension, so this medication has been prescribed. So ideally, if this beneficial refugee moves from Kenya to South Sudan, for example, we should be in a position in the future, in the next year or so even, that Kenya Red Cross and South Sudan Red Crescent are able to communicate with each other. So the health clinic on the other end is able to receive this refugee with this health credential through the digital identity or the wallet. Next, please. And these are the three different models that we have explored, because this is a question that we get asked quite often regarding how the relationship between a national or, within a civil society and a startup as well as a company is in present. It's a solution that was designed from the start with the Kenya Red Cross in the picture and Gravity. So it's a solution that together the two partners have come together to create. Therefore, the ownership is on both ends. In terms of data storage and how it's going to be stored, these are the three different models. I won't go into detail for each of the model because of time, but this is how we do it. And we're currently at model 2, which we've absorbed, that we want to host the solution within our servers. We want to have their license, but also have the setup fee covered by the Gravity Earth. And then we have about 5 national or NGOs, well, I say national societies because of Kenya Red Cross, but national societies and non-governmental organizations that can participate within one model. So it becomes a cost that is then shared across 5 partners. So you don't have the entire cost dependent on one partner, because that becomes a challenge with sustainability of the financials. Next, please. And maybe just a quick one where we are at right now is we are currently advocating for this solution and this digital wallets to become something that the government identifies as a humanitarian wallet, a humanitarian ID, so that we're able to make this more interoperable. We're able to integrate more services through the humanitarian sector. So we already have different stakeholders, about 3 of them in the refugee camp, that are willing to already endorse and bring this onto their systems. We want to now start integrating this digital identity into existing emergency medical systems and health medical platforms. So when the person comes with it, it reflects into the clinic's system on what information is needed for service delivery at the check-in point, as well as cash then. I've tried to skim through, but I will end there and I'll hand over to Dr. Atick has come back, so to him as well.
Actually, thank you both. What we wanted to do just very quickly is get just sort of a quick set of lessons learned from this experience from both sides. Maybe each one of you could add one and then tag team with the other.
Okay, Eloise, okay, let me just go first because my mic's on. Okay, so I think from our end, what has been crucial for any digital identity to work is you need to be considerate about the language that is used on the platform, especially when it's digital, because in the refugee or migrant context, everyone is not able to converse in English or understand the language, so it needs to be flexible with language. The other part is data sensitivity. This has come out a lot, and it's like we can't emphasize enough on both ends as well to our partners, to our stakeholders, that yes, we are considerate of data protection, we are following the policies, but at every point, this is something that will keep knocking our doors, and I think it needs to be handled very sensitively to make sure there's any loopholes or any single hole that can cause a damage to the identification. But for us, the mega lesson has been over the past few years is advocacy at the government level. This is where the solution can become a win or a loss. From the start, we've had barriers, we've had limitations, of course, which we respect and understand. They're there for protecting individuals, but then also it becomes challenging for humanitarian service providers to keep pushing through and being flexible and equal, especially when budgets are limited. for humanitarian organizations. You can't constantly keep piloting a solution. You have to be at a stage where you want to scale it. And when you want to scale it, you need to be on the same page with the government for this to be something that is able to self-sustain itself, something that is able to remain in the community. So I think for us, the topmost lesson has been advocacy with the government and other organizations has been a hit and miss on both ends. So it's still something that we're learning over time, even though we've been using the solution for more than 4 years now. So yeah, over to you, Eloise. Maybe you can add as well on your side. Thanks.
Yeah, for us at Gravity, it was more how create a solution with the Kenya Red Cross to enable a quite technical solution to be able to be used by people in remote areas with, sometimes no access to phones in general, which is quite technical when you're using digital wallets. So we had to really understand how those people lived and what are they constrained to adapt a solution in a better way for them to still have access to everything that you can afford, which is what we did with the QR codes. We try to really keep them as light as possible to enable any smartphone to be able to scan and verify the information. So yeah, we're learning also every time, make sure that we can have also verification without any internet. So offline verification is a big thing for in our regions and areas where internet is quite hard to access.
What I liked a lot about this experience that both of you were involved in is the high degree of pragmatism and the innovation that you brought in. You did not go in and say, well, we have to solve the problem foundationally. Once again, you created a functional solution and said, it's not going to replace the foundational problem. The foundational problem will be solved over the next 10 years or whatever. But in the meantime, we don't need to wait. Here are ways in which we can help people who need it. And you brought in quite a bit of pragmatism. And I think this is an important message. I don't want governments to miss out on the innovation by just simply focusing on a foundational approach to say, unless we solve everything, we're not going to solve anything. And I think they need to be more open to collaborations with organizations that are bringing point solutions that are proving to actually be interoperable in a pragmatic way, not in a foundational way. So I think this is a topic we're going to come back to at the AGM, because that is exactly the issue, which is how does a centralized foundational identity system coexist with decentralized and other methodologies for identity verification and other functional ID systems. So we ran out of time, but if you have one last message to deliver, I'll leave it to each of you, and then we'll move on to the last segment.
It's okay for me, but you can go ahead, Priyanka.
Thanks. I think for me, it's just speaking from the experience of doing something like this in the field with the community. I think there's nothing more important than having dignified identity for the beneficiaries in the community. So as much as we're talking about ID for Africa, even in this case, and I love the title, it's always something that I like to mention. It's always about creating identification for beneficiaries because we respect their human right and because we respect what they need in terms of services, as opposed to looking at them as vulnerable people we want to solve problems for. So I think it's all around service providers and how we can improve our capacity as organizations to be better at how we offer services to the community or the other end. And that's where we need to always focus our energy on if we want to create a dignified solution. And I'll just end there. Thank you.
Well said, well said. Thank you both for being with us. And we'll keep an eye on how the projects are progressing. Okay, operator, please bring in the last segment, which we are going to hear yet another level of pragmatism. I think if there's one message you have to remember from today's episode is for you to make an impact on social protection and humanitarian aid, you have to be very pragmatic, because the world, that is a very, very messy, in the sense there are real issues on the ground, and you can't just think of it in the lab. You have to be in the field. So Gabriel Rohan from Paycode, thank you for being with us. And without any further delay, I'd like to give you the opportunity to share with us your thoughts about last mile inclusion, which is how do you get to the hardest portion of the population, which tend to be challenging to reach.
Thank you, Dr. Atick. It's been a fascinating few hours listening to some very interesting presentation, very interesting technology, and that pragmatism that you talked about. So just on me, Paycode provide a biometric smart card payments and switching and settlement system, and we do that in 8 African countries around the world. We issue that functional ID, and I'll get into talk about how we do that. Okay, so when I think about financial inclusion, I think about the sort of obstacles in these 3 buckets, if you like. In Africa, 39% of people have no identity. Big challenge in terms of being able to become banked when you've got no identity, and affordability is also an issue, but also the issue of connectivity. We're still in an era where there are communities in Africa that don't have a foundational identity. They can't afford a bank account. And on top of all that, they don't have any network connectivity. So these are the real last mile communities. And to bring them into the fold financially requires not only cost-effective solutions, but also maybe having to rethink how we deal with compliance. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we go along. So Dr. Atick and I have talked before about how in an ideal world, everyone would have a government issued ID. Indeed, you and the channel have done as much as anyone in furthering that particular cause. And you've also interviewed some of the leading providers in that space and representatives of governments, as we saw with Sierra Leone, that desire such a solution. They're working hard to achieve it. But is it something that we're going to see universally available in the short to medium term? I fear it isn't. And that's because of the sheer scale of the problem and the cost of the solution being really quite vast. So assuming that we all agree that we can't wait and that people can't wait for that foundational ID, what can we do to address the problem now? And one solution that I'm going to talk to you about today is one that we've been implementing for a number of years, where we're issuing a functional ID that we tokenize and use to interact with a purpose-built banking platform that's able to operate in the conditions that we find ourselves in that offline environment, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's an approach that's not without its challenges, but it is workable, as our experience demonstrates. So let me show you how it works in the real world, if I can. So apologies in advance for the quality of the video, but this is a real video taken, and I think it's sort of, in essence, what you deal with when you go out to last mile communities. We actually go out and onboard our customers in their own communities using the technology. This technology that you're looking at now is a little bit dated, and I'll show you the newer version now. But I guess this captures what it's like to reach those last mile communities and bring them into financial inclusion, together with all of the challenges that brings. And the last part here, I wanted to show you, in lots of cases, we end up digitizing part of a flow, and then we end up having to turn it back into cash. Now, these, what are effectively ATMs on the back of a truck, are operating using that functional ID that I talked about, that person's identity, and it's all completely unconnected. It's all completely offline, and is traveling around to the various villages, dispensing cash in a orderly fashion. And I just thought it was worth sharing that solutions, technical solutions are available to solve the problems that we have in last mile delivery. Can I explain to you then about how we create that functional identity in the field? Firstly, a blank card, bank cards, similar to the ones that you have in your wallet. We insert that into the top of the device, and this device replaces those hard cases that you saw earlier on in that video. And the only difference between this card and a card you might have in your wallet is it probably has a larger chip, a larger memory, because we store data on that, and that's key to how we provide the identity and we operate offline. There's a customizable application that runs on the tablet, which walks the operator through the onboarding process, and where we capture the data that's required by the card issuer. Each of the 10 fingers are captured, as you can see there in the picture. And whilst the rest of the data is being collected, a deduplication process is carried out with the database so that we can ensure that this applicant is unique. Quite often, that's all we're able to do. There is no source of truth in many of the areas that we're working in. If there is a source of truth, we can consult it. But in many areas, there's no source of truth. All we're able to say is that this person is a unique individual. So once that process is complete, the data that we've captured is written to the chip on the smart card, as well as to the KYC server at the bank, and the card's issued to the recipient. So it's alive and it's active as soon as it comes out of the machine. And as I said, it's issued in the community itself. If you go to the next slide, please. So in terms of that application that runs on the tablet, it is customizable, but this is sort of typical KYC information that might be captured. We capture facial images, we capture any documentation that might be available. In some circumstances, when we're doing social grant distribution, we might get a pre-list, which saves time in terms of filling out those fields and also helps us to clean up that database on behalf of the donor, and also remove those ghost recipients during that process. So next slide, please. So the card's ready to go live, as I said, when it comes out of the tablet. The onboarding process usually takes between 5 and 7 minutes, and the way we do that with these mass onboardings is to train local students. We find local students within a few hours of training can follow their way through the software on the tablet, and it tells them how to capture each finger. And just to give you some sort of context, we registered 200,000 individuals in deep rural Zambia, and it took about 8 weeks to do that registration process. But clearly, it's a function of how many tablets and how many students. You can go more quickly or more slowly. And we also provide, as you can see there, it's important that digital literacy is key to the success of any system. And we also spend time training people in the community so that can explain in people's own language and culture how the system works and how they can take advantage of it going forward. So the next slide, please. So this point of sale device is very important in the context of how this functional identity and payment card is used on a day-to-day basis. The POS, as you heard earlier on from our friends at Famoco, we've been using their technology for a number of years, and it works very well for the type of application that both they and we are using it for. So as well as the biometric and the KYC data that's stored on the card, it also contains a digital wallet, which is a representation of the value that you as the cardholder have with the real funds which are held at the bank. So the real funds stay in the bank. The technology creates a digital representation of those funds which move around the network, and then at settlement, the software instructs the bank where to move the real money to. Importantly, in terms of how it operates, this point of sale device contains not one SIM card, but two SIM cards. So one is clearly used for communicating the data to the back-end server, but the other one is used for storing details of the transaction when that point of sale device isn't online. So this is what allows us to be able to carry on and do transactions without that point of sale device being online all the time. You'll notice that there's no chip and pin. Chip and pin isn't used in our network. So we're always using biometric data to verify those transactions. So both at the agent level and the customer level, both have to verify that a transaction is legitimate before that transaction can take place. So move on to the next one. So in terms of what can be done at that point of sale device, you know, a lot of the work we do is social grant distribution, distributing food grants, distributing agriculture payments and health, being able to receive payments. People use this system to pay wages, receive wages. We're also interoperable. We integrate with micro loan providers and mobile wallets and other banks. Our ideal is to have multiple banks connected to the solution, and we can all use the same rails to provide services to those end users. Receiving international remittance is a big growth area for us. It's easier to receive the remittance onto a card in a local village rather than having to travel a long way. Clearly, you can use that card to make purchases subject to liquidity at the retailer. You can cash out, you can send value to other cards. We often integrate with utilities and other things that you can go to the point of sale in the village and pay your utility bill rather than having to travel. The same goes for airtime, and you can also print a mini statement, so almost treat it like a mini bank. The next slide, please. So I want to just touch on the role of central banks and the regulatory environment. So key to operating a system like this is that the central bank and the regulator in the country are satisfied with it. And I'm happy to say that our largest installation to date is with the Ghana Interbank Payments and Settlement System, which is owned by the Central Bank of Ghana. Thankfully, regulators are starting to recognise, as we all do, I think, that the absence of a foundational ID can't be allowed to consign what sometimes a large percentage of the population to financial exclusion because of trying to enforce a set of requirements that they can never meet. Instead, you know, some wish to restrict the value of transactions on a weekly or monthly basis, only allowing citizens to move into upper tiers when they're able to provide additional KYC document, which is fine. You know, we have to accept that people in this demographic are, you know, they're highly unlikely to be financing international terrorism, and we need to have appropriate constraints and appropriate KYC that addresses that particular problem. So it's the functional ID, which I believe is the key to this whole process. And the regulator can be satisfied that whilst we can't confirm the identity of the individual, what we can guarantee is that the individual is unique, and that unique identity is attached to every single transaction throughout the lifetime of that identity. So, final slide, I guess my proposition is that a functional ID together with a payments platform that requires only intermittent connectivity does equal a significant step forward on the road to financial inclusion. And whilst it might be narrow in its function compared to a foundational ID, it does that function extremely well. So where do we go from here? I mean, the technology is improving, both the equipment and the software. We're starting to see the ability to capture facial images and use face and fingerprint and all sorts of things, which ultimately is going to drive out the cost of implementing a solution like this.
Excellent. It's quite interesting, Gabe, what you shared with us. I have one quick question in the interest of time. How is the retention been of the users? I mean, do they use it one time and they're hooked on it? They use it again and again, or is it intermittent? How's the usability and retention?
Yeah, I guess the projects are all different. In Ghana, which is our biggest implementation, that has grown. We started that with 1.5 million users and one project funded by the World Bank, and there are now 17 different projects running on that, and they're probably close to 4.5 million cards. In other cases, when we're doing a social grant, we've just done a project in Mozambique, and it runs for the duration that the NGO is supporting those people, and then sadly it gets switched off again. So there's no standard answer to that, but I think when people become familiar with it. And the other thing that's very noticeable is when you first do a food grant, for example, people will withdraw all the money and put it back onto the mattress. But over time and with education, they find that it's safer to leave it in the card.
Okay, and they will start to trust the system.
Absolutely.
As they get to be familiar with it. Gabe, we ran out of time, but I want to thank you again for wonderful presentation and sharing with us the reality of the last mile. And for the audience, thank you for staying with us. If I were to summarize this episode, I would say we're learning that when it comes to social protection, you really gotta be pragmatic. Pragmatism is the word, functional ID is the word, interoperability is the word, but not interoperability as designed by an engineer in a lab, but interoperability as designed by somebody who's very pragmatic and understands the situation in the field. So anyways, as I said earlier, social protection is going to be an important area of focus for us throughout the year. We are keen on giving solutions that respect privacy, and luckily there are plenty in this field, so you don't need to feel that you're endorsing centralized schemes and surveillance methods. We want to give people the identity that they merit and that empowers them without infringing on their privacy or their legal and human rights. So this is a topic that will accompany us, and we'll be back again to address it in a deeper manner. This is the last livecast before the AGM. So we will be communicating to you within the other channels, which is the newsletters and the social media. So please stay tuned for those channels. It's very important. If you are coming to the AGM, please register today. I'm not kidding when I say we may not be able to accommodate you if you delay, because there is a significant demand right now, which is great. And so looking forward to seeing you at the AGM and to continuing this journey together. So thank you once again for staying with us. Bye-bye.